Hello and welcome, my gentle and of course very modern apes. Welcome to the Sunday show. Truly, here we are at where I'm at, like right in the middle of the day. Today is the 16th of June. I'm glad to see you here. We're here ready to take calls. The lines are open, so if you are a theist out there, as always, theists get priority. Call in, ask us your questions. As always, when I'm here, I'm waiting with bated breath. Evolution, please. I want to talk creationism. I want to talk evolution. I want to talk any other brand of biological pseudoscience that you can dream up. I'm here with Paulogia. Paul of Paulogia, I guess would be a better way of putting it. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. It's later in the day for me because I'm on the other coast, but all good. Spoilers, the day turns out all right.
Oh, good. Thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. I hate knowing that it's coming and not knowing
Yeah.
how it's gonna be.
And also we get many excellent callers. So hopefully
really?
they're dialing in right now. I want to hear about I want to hear about the evidence for God. I want to hear about divine hiddenness. I want to hear about the resurrection. I want to hear about all that stuff. And also, I was a deep dive back into. Do you ever watch Is Genesis History?
Paul, I was gonna ask you about this because I saw that pop up on my feed the other day, and I was like, "Oh my God, what a flashback that is!" I'm glad to see you're releasing a remastered version of it because God knows we need it right now.
Exactly. So I was back into the whole creationist, pull my hair out about some of the things that they want to say mindset. So yeah, I'm all for that too. Age of the Earth, get in here, all good.
Oh please, yes, Age of the Earth, any of it, any and all of it. We're pleased to field those types of calls. I always get optimistic with this kind of thing, but last week in particular, I put a notice out on Twitter where I was like, hey, all the creationists who are always like commenting on my Twitter page here and trying to start fights with me that I fall for every time and engage with, feeding directly into what it is that they want. How about you just call in and we'll just hash this out without having to wait for the replies. And of course, they never show up. Why would they?
No. I actually emailed a handful of I even emailed a handful of creationists that I know that a couple hours ago. We'll see if they call.
Please, yes. They know that I'm limited, that my power levels are limited by a character limit, right? Like they won't come on because then I can get on with the monologues and they can handle that. Very few can, Paul.
And Wendell, if you're out there, call on in.
Wendell would never show up on one of these, despite the fact that this is a man who, and I believe you're the one who told me this, who was on Eric Hoven's show talking about how to engage with non-creationists, or I guess like skeptics or whatever.
Exactly.
Online, but he won't come in here and put his money where his mouth is.
He should be off church by now. He's a pastor, so hopefully he's done. He's had his lunch and under-tipped a waitress somewhere, and now he should call in.
This is your call to action, gentle and modern viewers. If you're on Twitter, first of all, my condolences. Second of all, please feel free to heckle Wendell and tell him to call in. His two favorite people are on here right now. Call in. We'll answer any and all questions about whatever he wants. He can have two questions: an evolution question and a resurrection question.
Nice.
Speaking of callers, we've got some folks sitting on the line ready to go. Now, let's see. We do have we give preference here to theistic callers. So my lovely atheist callers who are on the line right now, both of which who have questions about evolution and taxonomy, please appreciate the level of restraint that I'm using in giving preference to our theist callers here, because I would love nothing more than to answer those questions. But it seems like first and foremost, we have a call from Matthew, pronouns he, him, from Ohio. He's a theist, and he wants to clarify a common misconception when it comes to engaging with the Bible. I feel like that's right up your alley, Paul. So we're going to go ahead and start with Matthew. Matthew, you're on the Sunday show. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Tell us a little bit more about your question or your comments or your concerns.
Yes. So there is this, I constantly talk to atheists here and there, and I constantly hear this thing about you can't use the Bible to prove the Bible, or you can't use a book to prove a book. And they'll say that's like a circular argument. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, you can. So I think you would agree that things aren't they're not self-fulfilling, or they're not self-affirming, right? Like I can't write on a piece of napkin that that what is written on this napkin is true. Like, right? If I hand you a napkin and it says everything written on this napkin is true, and then I write a bunch of other things, that isn't evidence that those things are true, right? I assume you'd accept that.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the Bible, there's different levels.
I guess it will depend on what you write on the napkin, I guess.
No. Well, no, but that's the point. That's exactly the point, is that by writing it on, you would affirm it. It would depend entirely on what was written there, and you would evaluate those statements not based on the initial intro, everything written on this napkin is true. You would evaluate it based on non-napkin criteria. Correct?
So basically you would say that it's a circular argument to say you can't use a book to prove a book. Is that what you would say?
Correct. Now, the Bible, I want to be clear that we have the nuance here that the Bible is a collection of books. In the Protestant Bible, the one that I'm most familiar with, there's 66 books, right? And some of them will talk about the same topics on occasion. And there is an argument that can be made on occasion that some of those things can be used potentially to corroborate each other where they speak about the same thing. But for example, let's take something that's in just one place. Let's take the death of the first martyr, Stephen, right? Like the story of Stephen, the first martyr, is only in Acts. So it would be fine for me to say that you are using the Bible to affirm the Bible if you want to point to that, right? Because it's only in one place. So I do want to make that nuance that the Bible, I think an atheist is incorrect, or anyone, even a Christian, doesn't matter, is incorrect to consider that just because it's bound in one volume right now, that it is necessarily, the same as the napkin entirely. But a lot of the principle is true. For example, that death of Stephen example is only told in the book of Acts. And so it would be correct for me to, hold up my cup as I do on occasion and say, for the Bible tells me so, is why that works, right? So does that make sense? And am I making a mistake?
So, I mean, for that example, you're corroborating the Bible with the Bible, right? What you're saying?
Yeah, that's not the way you would corroborate something.
Circular?
That would be circular for me to, again, like the napkin example.
Okay, so let's say, for example, I have I give you an instruction booklet on how to build a chair, right? And I say, how would you prove this instruction booklet to be true?
Well, there's a few things you could do. One is you could actually follow the instructions and figure out to what extent the pieces fit together, that it matched the pieces that were in the box that came with the chair, that the chair was stable and seemed to be of approximately the quality that was being sold to you. That wouldn't be definitive proof, but that would be one way to do it. Another thing you could do is you could go to the manufacturer's website, which often have the PDFs of the instructions. You could see whether the instructions that someone handed me matches what's on the manufacturer's website. I could also call the manufacturer and get more information from that. There's a bunch of different ways. Those are just a few off the top of my head.
Right, but in its simplest form, you can use the instruction booklet to prove itself by building the chair.
So you're correct in that. What we're looking for is future predictions. That's always in science. What you want is future predictions to test a hypothesis. And so you could say, hey, are these instructions for a chair? And I put together a chair. Sure. Do you feel that it's analogous to the Bible in some way?
Well, before I get into the Bible, because I know that can be challenged, or we can get into that. I just want to clarify the reason why I call it, to clarify that common misconception, which will say you can't use a book to prove a book, because when you use an instruction booklet or something like that, you're using a book basically to prove a book. I just want to make that clear. So I hear that a lot. I feel like.
Go ahead,
yeah,
Erika.
I have a bit of a problem with that, right? Because when you're using everything Paul just listed, the way that you're testing the veracity of the instruction booklet is external, right? You're either using the pieces of the chair that came with the instruction booklet to test the instruction booklet to see if it's accurate, right? Or you're calling and comparing it to somebody else's version of that instruction booklet to see if it's consistent, or you're testing it with other types of instruction booklets to see if they have similarities. In no way can you test the instruction booklet in isolation, completely by itself, with no parts, with no nails, with no hammer, whatever. You can't test how well it lets you build a chair without the pieces of the chair. So in that way, when you're testing the veracity of the Bible, you're testing it by comparing it to other ancient Near Eastern sources. That's not using the Bible to prove the Bible, or a historical context that we can tell from the archaeological record. That's not using the Bible to prove the Bible, right?
And
go ahead.
Sorry, if I may. I understand you're using the Bible a lot, and I think there are some. I think I would love to talk to you about that and the Bible and all that stuff, and bring that up if I have time. I know you have other callers, but I'm just wanting to stay focused on clarifying the idea of you can't use a book to prove a book. Even if you were, let's say you were locked in a room and there was a closet door, and that instruction booklet says, behind this closet door are the tools you need to build this chair. How would you prove that book to be true?
You'd open the closet door.
You open the closet door, and then you see the things, and then you follow the instructions in the booklet.
But you understand that you just went to something external to the instruction booklet.
Because the closet door isn't the instruction booklet. I think a more analogous, if I may, if I may, really quick, Matthew, just to make sure you know where I stand on this. A better analogy would be like, okay, if the instruction booklet says, see page 86 for more information on, building the back of the chair, and then you turn to page 86, and then there's more information about how to build the back of the chair, right? That's internal. That would be using the instruction booklet to test its own veracity. But the second you're bringing out things that are not the book itself, you're no longer using the book to prove the book. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, but you still can use the book, as you even said, to prove the book is to be true.
No, I don't think, Matthew. I don't think you're understanding.
Okay.
So in one case, right? Like in one case, you're taking the instruction booklet. If I sit in the room and someone, like I'm reading my instruction booklet on how to build a chair, and it says on page 86, there's more information on how to build the back of the chair. What I can do in that room without even standing up is go to page 86 and see what it says. And if it says that they're here's how you build the back of the chair, then the book was correct about itself. It did in fact have more information on building the back of the chair on page 86. If it says check behind the closet door that's in the room with you to see if the tools are there to help me build my chair, I have to engage with material outside of the instruction booklet. You see what I mean?
Yeah, that's totally fine. And that's totally fine to the analogy, right? You're using the material that is given to build the chair, but where do you get the information on how to build a chair with those materials?
I don't really understand how that relates back to the concept of using the book to prove the book.
Well, I'm asking, where did you get the information on how to put those materials together to put the chair together?
From the instruction book. But the way that you're testing the veracity of those instructions,
people put together chairs with no instructions all the time.
I understand that. Right. I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to go into like outside. Just people do this, we'll do that. All I'm just saying is that I'm using the analogy to clarify the misconception.
Using the book to prove the book. Matthew, using the book to prove the book is, if you want to stick with instruction manuals, is to say, hey, here's an instruction manual from IKEA. Look on the back page, and the back page is a picture of a chair. Therefore, this is instruction manuals for a chair. That's what using a book to prove a book means. As soon as you bring in anything else, then you are no longer using the book to prove the book.
So what are you using to prove, or what are you using to figure out how to put the chair together?
So, obviously we're using the instructions, and the verification is the chair. So the verification isn't the book. Right. The verification is the chair. We're not saying the books aren't useful. We're not saying the books aren't useful.
Mm.
Books can be useful, but the verification in the end is the chair, not the instructions. I don't tell my partner, hey, I built a chair. See, here's the instructions. I don't show her the instructions to prove that I built a chair.
Right, but you still have the instructions that help you build the chair, right?
Right, but so like a way that you might like, I hear this a lot that like there's archaeological evidence that supports the events in the Bible, and I think that the Bible gives accurate archaeological or historical accounts a lot. It doesn't do it all the time, but it does it a lot. It's a history book for people. A lot like this group of people who lived in the ancient Near East in a lot of ways, even if it's polemical or whatever a lot of the time, or exaggerated or exalted prose or whatever. But you can test the veracity of that by reading in the Old Testament. It says, okay, it's talking about the siege of Tyre or something like that, or Jericho, or something along those lines. You can see if that's something that actually happened by turning to the archaeological record and investigating it in the areas where the Bible says that it happened, right? But that's not using the book to prove that. That's using the archaeological record to validate it. In the same way, when you use a chair to validate the instruction manual, that's not the instruction manual that's doing the proving. It's not doing the legwork. It's the chair.
I think I see what you're saying. So you're saying that if you have the chair shows you, once you build the chair, it shows you that the instruction booklet is valid.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. So.
But the chair isn't the manual. Okay, the manual is the manual.
Pardon?
I said the chair is not the manual. The manual is the manual. The chair is external evidence that you're using to support the veracity of the manual.
Mm-hmm. But you would say that you get the information from the manual.
Sure.
Yeah. In this case, yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, and also the biblical case, this is, like I said, I was talking for the Bible too. But in the biblical case, the Bible is an instruction booklet, or an instruction book. That's what the point of the scriptures are for instruction and teaching.
Many people would disagree, but carry on.
Right. So
sorry, Erika, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't. Yeah. You didn't. It's okay.
So if you follow the instructions and you see the result, pardon?
Yeah, go ahead. Finish this thought, please.
Yeah. If you follow the instructions and you see the result, would you say, like, for example, it talks about, for the Bible is God, I'm sure you guys know this verse, the Bible is God inspired and made for instruction and righteousness, so that the man of God.
Timothy 3:15, yes.
Yeah. Yep. 3:16 and 17. So when the person is walking in this righteousness and doing these things that the Bible teaches them to do, would that be the confirmation that the Bible is valid? And not,
I don't think so, because the Bible does not claim that people will be good. The Bible does not claim that people will have good lives. The Bible makes none of those claims. In fact, it tells you you'll have people will fail, and it tells you that people will have sorrow. So none of those predictions are what's useful.
Hold on. I agree that the Bible doesn't say that you'll have good life, but it does tell you that you will be righteous and holy.
No, it does not. No one is righteous. No, not one.
Well, that's before Christ. I'm talking about in Christ. It tells you you'll be righteous.
No. But on this earth, no one is righteous. On this earth, not a single person is righteous. So the proof will be, for Erika and I, the proof will be on Judgment Day. So after we die, or when if there's a second coming, like as some people think is predicted, some people don't, that will be the evidence. Changed lives means nothing. Changed lives is because that's people's lives change for a myriad of reasons, right? We see changed lives out of a good movie or a bad philosophy book. Like a magazine article can change your behavior. So that's not what we're looking for. And that's not even ultimately what the Bible predicts is going to happen. So you have to make a testable prediction. Now, the testable predictions since Jesus isn't, we can't observe the resurrected Jesus, for example, right now. Mm-hmm. We have to. The proof will come on Judgment Day, and then I will absolutely say external corroboration. I will be on your team, Matthew.
I got you. So doesn't the Bible say that though we can live the rest of his life in the flesh without, not to the lust of man, but to the will of God, meaning basically not sinning? We can stop sinning.
I have never interpreted it that way. No, and that's news to me. I have been involved with a bunch of denominations, and I've never been involved with one that predicted that in this life that a single human has lived even one 24-hour period without sinning.
Do you mind if I read a verse real quick?
Go for it.
Yeah. So in 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, it says, "For as much then as Christ has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourself likewise with the same mind. For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of God."
That he no longer should, but that doesn't mean that anyone has achieved that. Even Paul, the Apostle Paul, kept talking about his struggles with sin, and that. Now, I don't think for 1 second that Peter wrote 1st and 2nd Peter, which is the ironic part. But if I want to go to the epistles of Paul, he struggled. He had thorns in his flesh. He struggled with sin. Like, so I don't know how that your prescription to say that there's someone, and like, would you put yourself up, Matthew, as someone saying, have you gone the last 24 hours without sinning?
I'm not sure if last 24 hours I probably have. I don't know. I don't remember any sin that I have done.
You haven't looked at anyone lustfully. You haven't been prideful.
Yeah, your sins can be internal. They don't have to be an external action, right? Like you can even think in impure thoughts, and that's
right. So, for example, like, let's say if somebody walks by and a thought comes to my mind, and I'm like, that's a weird thought, because we all have brains and intrusive thoughts into your brain. I wouldn't say that is sin. Would you say that is sin?
Jesus did. Anyone who murders is guilty of sin, but anyone who thinks Raka, you fool, is guilty of murder.
Right. No, I agree with that, but that's like an intentional thought. Like, you're thinking your brother is worthless. You're like,
did Jesus think, like, what did Jesus? No. Did Jesus say anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has committed adultery within his heart?
Right. I agree with that.
Did it say intention? Did it say intentionally?
Well, can you desire something without intention?
Of course you can.
Can you?
What if you smell? What if you're hungry and you smell a delicious apple pie, and you desire it? You didn't like. Oh, I'm thinking about it. It's just the thing that happens.
Well, let's say I see the apple pie and I smell it. It smells good, but I know I shouldn't eat it. I won't be if I don't lust after it and like really think about it and meditate on it and desire it. Then I'm not lusting after it. I say, oh, that smells good. That's an apple pie, but I know I shouldn't eat it, so I should stay away from it.
That is not a common interpretation of what Jesus says.
Common interpretation. Well, you would agree that a lot of Christians, I'm sure, don't follow the Bible and have common interpretation doesn't mean correct interpretation, right? Correct?
So, but let's get back to the original question. Is like, the Bible does not predict that humans, like that verse you gave me is what you should do and what is possible. It does not. That's not the prediction saying. Jesus didn't say, believe in me and everyone will be perfect. In fact, the Bible says that many will predict, many will give, will move mountains. They will do miracles in my name, and yet they will still, I will still say to them on that day, Lord, I did not know you. So,
right.
Like that is not the guarantee of anything. The what happens in this world and the fruits of the Spirit, for example.
He doesn't say in so many words that you will be perfect, but he does say a disciple. What does he say? He says, a disciple is not above his master, but anyone who's perfect shall be as his master.
Okay, so first, there's like so many weird tangents with this. So if you want to say that the test of the Bible is how close people are to Jesus, can you get 3 people in a room to tell me what the character of Jesus was beyond the word perfect? Because I'm not convinced you can, for me to use as a comparison, right? Like if we want to say something is a meter long, we can have most of the planet has come to an agreement about what the length of a meter is, and so then we can measure it. Most of the planet has not agreed what the character of Jesus is, against which we can measure it.
Right, but the Bible gives a character, and those who believe will identify that character as perfect, wouldn't they not?
No. No. Some people love hippie Jesus. Some people think that Jesus is coming with a gun. Okay, so that's for you to work out as theists amongst yourselves. That cannot be evidence to me or anyone that the Bible is true, because you say some people have characteristics that I seem to like. Right, because there's 100. So you would say that because you can find 100 other people who have those characteristics that don't believe in Jesus. So that's obviously not a very good test. But even if you said, "Hey, here's a church full of people that are all behave in a way that you like subjectively," doesn't tell you anything about the truth of what their beliefs say, right?
Okay. So earlier you said that that would be the proof on the day of judgment. If you saw that, are you saying that wouldn't necessarily be the proof? Then even that wouldn't be the proof?
No, I'm telling you, if I'm standing in front of the judgment, if I'm standing in front of judge God, I'm going to say, I was wrong. You are real. I can't imagine I can't imagine anything else.
Right, but I mean, like you said, the perfection part. You said if you saw somebody, and you said I said that wouldn't happen.
Oh, if I saw someone who if I saw someone I thought was behaving in a way that I subjectively thought was perfect, no, that wouldn't tell me anything about whether what motivated them to achieve that perfection was the Bible.
You said that would convince you.
No, I'm sorry if I misspoke, because that absolutely would not. Okay. I think I've been pretty consistent that the character of a person is entirely subjective. Like what a perfection is, in that is. So if I found someone who just matched my ideal of perfection, no, I still wouldn't. Even if they said the reason I act this way is because of Jesus, I'm gonna, on here we are on Father's Day. My dad is the best person I know, just bar none, just the best person I know. He's a Christian. I do not believe that the reason he is the character traits that I admire in him, I don't think come from Jesus. I think they come from his character that I've always known. So that's, to me, like, I can't even imagine anyone better than my dad. And so, and I still don't accept that the reason he is that way is because the Bible is true. And it would be crazy for me to go, hey, everyone, look at my dad, who I subjectively think is perfect, or the best person I know, not perfect, but the best person I know. Therefore, the Bible is true because the subjective view that I have of his character is positive, and he believes this. Like, do you get why that's unconvincing?
Yeah.
It's also a hard sell, because even if we could agree on something that was like, okay, if someone has all of these external characteristics and they do all of these things and they donate to all these charities and this is how they spend their time and whatever, like, even if we could agree on all of that, because there are transgressions that you could do in your noodle, right, there would still be no way for us to know that this person was actually perfect. There could be stuff going on under the hood. They could be the most vile person you've ever met in your life, with all of the thoughts that they have. I think that's why it's such a hard sell for people. And when folks are looking for ways to, like, provide empirical, objective support for the Bible, they turn to, like, the historical events that it describes, or how it corroborates other documents, right? Like, that's something that's objective in a way that everybody can agree on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Matthew, if I found a Muslim who just met all of your subjective criteria better than any Christian you knew, because that's plausible, right?
Well, no, I don't think it's subjective. That's the only thing.
Well, if I was able to find someone who a non-Christian, because maybe you have let's just say I found someone who didn't believe, who met every criteria you imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Would you then give up Christianity and say, "Oh, that can't be true," because the person who's living the best earthly life that you've encountered isn't a Christian? Would that be convincing to you?
Well, it will just show me that they're keeping the law of God and keeping His commandments, keeping Christ's commandments. So no, I wouldn't stop me. They're just a Christian.
Right. So for that same reason, Matthew, your argument here is not going to be convincing to another non-believer.
Okay.
Do you see how
I appreciate that. Just to sum up, going back to the instruction booklet analogy, you would say that the book is useful to use, but it's not the proof itself. The actual what comes out of the book would be the proof.
Well, how well the book aligns to reality is a better way to phrase it.
Got it. Yeah, because it builds the chair that it said it would help you build. You build the chair that I said it will help you build, and in reality, there is a chair there.
I think you can imagine too, what if the book had little inspirational quotes and phrases on every page that are like, "Oh, believe in yourself," or treat yourself every now and again, stuff that's internal, because then theoretically the book could have some kind of beneficial impact to you without necessarily building the chair, and one that is somewhat subjective. So I think it's better to say the book, how well the book aligns to reality, and if you want to ascribe value to it at a personal level, you can, but that's never going to be an objective means by which others can evaluate it.
Okay, I got it.
Cool. Was this a good little hash out session?
I appreciate it. Yes.
Cool. Thank you very much for calling in, Matthew.
All right.
Bye.
Call back whenever you like, and have a wonderful Father's Day. That was a good one.
If you celebrate.
Yeah.
Not everyone is that a positive thing. So I didn't mean to bring that up today. But my dad is the best person I know. So
I love my dad very much as well. So it's good by me.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that was a good one. Let's see what else we got on the docket. I know we had another theist caller. We actually have two more theist callers. Okay, first we have a caller. This is a spiritual account. This is going to be interesting. This is Erika, him. He's from the Netherlands. He identifies as spiritual, and he has a question: is God responsible and accountable for His creation? Which I think is an interesting take. Eric, awesome. Welcome to the Sunday Show. Can you hear us? Eric, are you there? Eric, SOS.
Oh, no.
Dang, I don't know if he's there. I don't think we have him.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, I'm glad we
Did you have a nap, Eric?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Carry on.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your question and your thoughts.
So I was a Christian in my younger years, and the previous caller was interesting for me because I'm a little nervous now.
It's just before you continue there, Eric, you're clicking a little bit, and I want to make sure that we can hear you as clearly as possible. Are you perhaps on speakerphone right now?
Yeah.
Try taking yourself off speakerphone, because that way we can hear you a little bit clearer.
Okay, I'll look.
If you can.
I'm trying.
You're already a lot clearer, so whatever you're doing now is good. And once you've got that figured out, just continue on your merry way. No stress, no pressure. It's just us. Me and Paul don't bite.
We're pretty chill.
I like to think that we're pretty chill. I like to think that we're hard to rile. All right, how we doing there, Eric?
Did we lose him?
I hope not. Okay, Eric, if you're still there, I'm give it another couple minutes. Couple seconds probably before we got a bop.
Seconds, yeah.
Yeah. Shoot.
Can we send him back to the queue?
Too. Yeah, I'm gonna return him to the queue. Eric, we're gonna move on to another caller, see if you can sort out the speakerphone thing, and we're gonna come back to you. So stay there. Stay there if you can. I'm sorry. I really want to hear what you have to say, so stick around. Okay, I'm sending him back to the queue. He's back in the queue. Instead, we're going to move to our other theist caller. Again, my wonderful atheist callers who have fun evolution questions. Please also stay. This is Nick, him, from Arizona. He's a theist, and he's calling with a sentence that I really want to hear elaborated on. He says, "We live in a cult image fiefdom." So, Nick, please elaborate a little bit on that if you're there. Can you hear us?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Wonderful.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going well.
We actually live in some version of Jim Crow currently, where people set up grand, ornate displays of themselves and take in an unreasonable income while producing an economically void product. Like it's a product that doesn't do anything. And we give them special social status in class in our society and treat them as lords. And they're called celebrities.
So
okay.
Could you elaborate on that a little? How's that? Because here we typically talk about like theism and related concepts. How do you want to draw that through line?
A cult image is prohibited in the Torah. It's okay. Image worshiping. It's idolatry.
Okay, Paul, do you want to?
I'm wondering, Nick. Why? First of all, why the laugh? Are you? Is this a real call?
Because it's kind of hilarious when you realize it. Like me, you, and Erika are all serfs to pornographers. People that have sex on camera for a living. They take in an unreasonable income. They make lots of money. They have a mansion. They might have a yacht. They can take all the vacation time that they want. And they're given a special social class in our society, and that's terrible. That's irrational.
Do you think that either of us are advocating for that?
By doing nothing about it, you are complicit by inaction.
So how would you suggest that one not be complicit? Like, what are you doing?
I write about it. I post on social media. I talk to people about it. I advocate against it.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure where to go with this. Like, I would, I don't like that there's a massive class disparity in the United States. That's an opinion that I personally hold. But I don't think we would disagree on at least that point, Nick. But I'm not really sure where to take it outside of that. Paul, do you have any ideas?
No, and I mean, if you want a strong defense of capitalism as it sits right now in the Western world, I don't think Erika or I are going to make that defense. I also in my life.
Here's the thing: is that celebrities are de facto religion in the United States. Image worshiping, when somebody exalts themselves through a cult image, by exalting themselves and self-aggrandizing themselves over their neighbor and over the rest of us, over the working class. They make us all their de facto slaves. That's a religion. Worshipping people is a religion. It's actually prohibited in the Torah. So I would say that's a proof by demonstration of the Torah.
Wait, you're trying to. This is maybe in the realm of what we actually care about. So you're trying to say that because people worship in your phrase,
images,
because
pictures.
They worship images and celebrities, that proves that the Torah is correct? Is that therefore the ... that I'm supposed to get?
Yeah. Proof by demonstration. I love atheists because you all are actually cult image worshippers. You guys are worshiping a cult image in the form of Hollywood, and you're ignoring the religion that's actually occurring in the room, which is a cult image. It's idolatry.
Yeah, so this is at least hitting on something that I think we could talk a little bit more about, right? Like, Paul, which celebrity are you worshiping right now? Who's topping your list?
Yeah, that's actually a weird answer because I'm currently working on a movie right now. So this weirdly, like I'm in this realm. I've worked in Hollywood. I've literally done all this stuff. So I'm not saying that but I just feel like maybe Nick, when you put yourself out on social media, are you not putting yourself out there as someone in the same sense to worship in this same sense, even if not to the same scale?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, you said that you write about this and that you post your opinions about this on social media. So are you then, Nick, not putting yourself forward for other people to worship in this same sense and in the same way?
So I don't have a $300 million bank account.
No, but you were talking about. Wait, Nick. You didn't say that money was part of the was the criteria for this worship.
I did. I implied it by saying that we're giving them special social status.
Okay, so let me say that I worship a broke person, but I absolutely, in every other way, am treating that person like a divine entity walking this earth. But they're broke.
Are we treating that person like a lord and giving them $100 million mansion and a yacht and a private airplane?
So hold on.
And giving them social status in our community.
So you have a very specific requirements here. So this is what I was trying to drive to. You have to have multiple intersections of things that you think are negative traits for this to be relevant.
I'm just describing the class situation, the segregation of society.
Well,
kind of like how a white slave owner treated a black person back in the 1800s.
All right, I'm gonna have to get liberal with the mute button. You gotta let this be a little bit of a back and forth, my friend. I get where you're going with there. Like I can appreciate the sentiment of wanting to reduce the class disparity in the United States, but you're kind of bouncing back and forth. Like you're kind of like retreating to that concept whenever Paul pushes even a little bit on this concept of like idolatry and
that's because that's
Hollywood. Like let's really hit the nail on the head here, right? What specifically characteristics would lead you to assign someone as like being a cultural image to the extent of idolatry or idol worship?
I've already described that. It's a different class of people. It's like a slave master, owning a black man back in the 17 or 1800s. Today, we have celebrities and they own the working class. Like,
yeah, there's a vast difference between criminal levels of classism that we experience in the United States today and literally owning another person as property. Those I would at least assert are absolutely different things. But Paul, yeah, I know you had a direction you wanted to go with this.
No, I've actually now become bored because I thought I kind of was for a minute there thinking that you might be trying to actually tie this to whatever your version of theism is. But it's now clear that you're not. You have a lot of complaints, some of which I share, some of which I feel are flaws on a spectrum, and different people fall on the flaws there. But unless you can drive this to ... therefore God, I feel like maybe this isn't the show for this conversation. I don't know, Erika, you can...
It's the second commandment, thou shalt not make and be any graven image or any image of anything in heaven above, the earth beneath, or the waters underneath the earth.
Yeah, I understand that is something that the Abrahamic God has commanded. Don't worship things. But the fact that people do something that the Bible commands against, no one can make a command against the thing that isn't happening, right? Like you don't make jaywalking laws if no one's wandering around where they shouldn't be. You don't say don't eat these Tide Pods if no one's eating the Tide Pods. You only make these rules. Go ahead.
To that end, like I struggle to think of a single religion out there that doesn't have a very basic rudimentary version of thou shalt not kill, right? Does that mean that all the religions are right because they've all converged on this single law that we typically agree on, right? Like I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, but I think you kind of wanted to come on here to give your opinions on this, but you don't actually have to give your opinions on this subject, but you don't really have a way to draw it to the what the purpose of the show is, right? Is to like make an argument more or less to theism or some level of pseudoscience. Like I understand your passion for the subject, but this isn't really, as Paul said, the show for that.
Yeah, idolatry is prohibited throughout the Bible, and cult images are the religion of the Canaanites.
Right, but there's lots of things that are...
I feel like I'm in Canaan. Huh?
You feel like you're what?
In Canaan.
You feel like you're in Canaan is fine. But as we said, the Bible prohibits lots of things. The Bible prohibits mixed fabric. That doesn't mean we actually want to have calls about mixed fabric. That's just not like and the merits of mixed fabric. Like that's just not really the point of the show, to discuss things that the Bible prohibits. The point of the show is to see whether the Bible is true, not whether it prohibits things that are good or bad.
And you're inherently a serf to the icons in Hollywood.
All right, brother. I feel like we're on a repeat track at this point. I feel like we've been trying. You've had multiple shots to take this someplace new and interesting, and we've tried to delve into it. But I genuinely think, Nick.
Where else? What other religious text does that? Prohibits idolatry and cult images.
Like every single Abrahamic religion, for one. I mean, how do you distinguish between Judaism and Islam or Christianity? Why yours? They prohibit this too.
Hinduism eschews all forms of materialism, like
Buddhism to some degree as well, depending on the denomination or sect or whatever.
Yeah, but what about idolatry and cult images?
No, my friend. My friend.
Is there a Native American religion that does that?
Are your goalposts on wheels?
Are you discounting my argument for no reason?
You're not actually making an argument. What you are asserting is that certain behaviors are either bad or you don't like them, and that's fine. But I'm just saying that's not the topic of this show.
No, I derived this theory from the Bible.
I'm gonna have to do it to do this, but I muted him. Nick, we've gone over multiple times. This is going to be the third time that we've talked about how there are multiple other religions, if not all of them, as Paul said, that prohibit idolatry to some degree or another. And your response to that was, what about the fact that Judaism prohibits idolatry? Are you serious? Like, we're chasing our tail here. So I'm going to unmute you here. I don't like muting people. I hate it. But I'm getting a little frustrated. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to unmute you. You got one more shot here. Let's hear an argument for what distinguishes Judaism from other religions in this lawmaking to the degree that it's convinced you that it is true above the others. I'm going to unmute you now, and then you can go nuts. You are unmuted now. Take it away.
I'm the Son of Man.
All right, we're dropping the call. Cool. If that guy had my address, I would fear for my life. That was not at all coherent. Could you pull anything out of that?
No, what just kept making me feel uncomfortable was he actually has a really good point with me. Like, Star Wars paid for my house. So
holy shit,
not only so I used to work for George Lucas. I think that's the thing that lots of people know. And so yeah, so weirdly in this way, yeah, I'm absolutely a slave to celebrity, and that was a whole part of my life before. But yes, no, I got nothing out of it. I feel like he wanted to rail against some certain things, and only I think he came up with this justification on the fly after we were pushing him on it. So there's lots of shows where you can call in and say capitalism is bad, and neither of us are necessarily going to disagree.
No, like, there's Discord servers. There's so many different call-in shows that you could go and make that exact case on it. Like, I feel like he wanted a soapbox, and so he came on here to use this soapbox. In a mean way, he might have, like, I don't know, he might have had something to drink, because there was also no coherence to the flow of his argument, right? Like, it was just circle after circle after circle. So I don't like dropping calls. I don't like muting people, but it is what it is. Fortunately, we have
owe
Eric
it to the
back.
other callers. That's right.
We do. We have Eric back. Eric, I'm pulling you back on. Can you hear us this time, Eric?
I hear you fine, so I hope you can hear me.
We do.
We hear you. Yes, wonderful. Okay, elaborate a little bit on your thoughts here. Let's do some recovery.
Okay. So I was talking to my ex-fellow believers in my church a while back, and I thought by myself, if we are held accountable ourselves as a human being, why is God different? So can we hold him accountable for his creation? So we have builders, we have designers, we have people making stuff, and if something is going wrong with that stuff, who is going to fix them? So God made us as humans. So if we are broke, we have sin in our lives, what is holding God back to fix us as humans?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree, right? Like, I've always struggled. I do not think in the slightest that I'm anywhere near the first person to think this, right? But it's like, okay, you put your creation, you want them to have free will in a garden, and then you put a ticking time bomb in there with them, right? The knowledge of good and evil. I don't understand why an all-powerful, all-loving, and all-knowing God would do that. I have a problem with that, right? Like, that's a pretty classic problem of evil. And I think you're right to have questions about that. Thoughts, Paul?
Well, so you said your fellow ex-believers were talking in church. Now I got a little bit confused by the number of negatives there. So, are you currently a God believer, Eric? Why were you in church? Did we lose Eric?
Eric, are you still there? Shoot. Okay.
All right. Then I will just add the one note, and then we can move on. But I do, that would absolutely be a problem. Like, let's say you lived in a world where you don't even have benevolent gods, right? We were created by non-benevolent gods who had more power than us. That would absolutely be a problem. There's any power disparity in holding someone accountable, even in our current society, when there's too much of a power disparity, it's very difficult to hold. We can't hold nature. We can't hold a volcano responsible for what it does, or we can't hold you've identified a thing that is kind of would suck about the nature of the universe if we were created by gods. I guess that was the extent of my thoughts.
Do you hear me
you
now?
are there, Eric.
We got him.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
I've got I'm on the phone and it's going automatically on a screen lock, and then it cuts me off. So I hear you, but you are not hearing me. So.
So Eric, where are you at, if you don't mind me asking? Like, because the call said that you identify as spiritual. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So I've got some experiences that you can describe as not physical, so more like things that happen and only you know, oh, hey, that's weird. So I call that more spiritual than really a person or a god influencing the situation, and a book dictating, you have to do this and that to become amends with God and have a relationship with that God. I will describe it like that. So
you've almost got like an allowance. Like, you allow your perspective is like you wouldn't classify yourself as a deist, but you've had weird things happen to you where you're like, maybe there's something I don't understand about the way that things are, and maybe that is a spiritual aspect of life. That's a fair way of describing it.
Also, in the relationship with people, sometimes you can relate to people without knowing them. So there's a connection between people, and you tell something, you don't know why, and you have a connection there. So I believe there's more between all living things than only what you see. So that's why I'm calling myself a more spiritualist.
Yeah, I mean, like, as far as that goes, I hold that there's more than we understand between living things, right? I just wouldn't classify it as a spiritual thing, right? Like, I think that there's so much to learn about the natural world, and there's probably phenomenally great concepts that we don't yet understand, but that doesn't mean that those things are supernatural, I suppose I'll say, at least not from my perspective.
No, so that's why I'm still looking and trying to understand how things can work, and so I'm open for dialogue therein. So it's not that I'm hooked on something. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I mean, like, I don't have any issue really with someone who's like, look, like here's where I'm at. I'm trying to figure it out, right? Like being curious is a wonderful, wonderful characteristic, and being open-minded is a wonderful characteristic. Just don't be so open that your brain falls out, you know? And take things.
I tend to more roll my eyes, and I hope I didn't. while I was here, when we talk about, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible. So both of those things. So therefore, I'm coming at this kind of skeptically. So unless I'm being demonstrated that there is some reason to think that, just for example, natural, common things that people have in common, or the fact that you might enjoy certain traits in people, and you immediately like someone who's fun loving, and you see someone fun loving, and you make that, you say, oh, well, that's a connection we made there, or we bonded over right now I'm bonding with some people over some sports things that are happening, for example, and I don't know them, but hey, we cheer for the same sports team, so neat. So we have a connection for a minute, and it's very immediate. There's lots of reasons why one makes quick connections, and or sometimes you feel like someone, hey, I'm suspicious of someone, or I don't like that guy and I can't put my finger on it. Doesn't mean that there's a supernatural element involved. So I am actually, until someone can explain to me what spiritual means in a way that is necessary, I just don't even know why it's in the conversation.
Yeah, I understand you. Sometimes it's difficult to describe something that you feel in your feelings, but can't see in the outside of your senses. So that's why I call it more of a spiritual something. So I hope.
Well, that's just an attribution. That's potentially an attribution error, though, right? Like you're now attributing to things that you can't necessarily justify.
My question,
right.
Eric, if you will, my question is why go supernatural with it? Like what about that is compelling to you?
So I think it's more because of the background that I have. So it's if there's a better explanation, I will gladly use it. So I'm willing to learn. So if that's more.
Uh-oh.
No, I think we clicked. I think the screen locked again.
No.
He'll come back. Eric.
I'm back.
Eric,
yeah.
come back. Okay. Sorry,
you're right. So, yeah, it's a stupid screensaver.
It's Gremlins. It's Gremlins on your phone. It must be. That's the only explanation.
Yeah. Smartphones, Smartphones. Oh.
No, I was trying to just demonstrate that maybe I was falsely attributing something.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you get the last bit, but I'm open for another word to describe it and to better make it in the conversation and maybe make it less heavy than it is. Well,
yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, Eric. Like, I think it's one of those things where you've got this past and you found a lot of comfort in it, presumably, right? And so that's why you sort of allow you're making room for it in your day to day to explain these things that don't currently have an answer. And like, I'm empathetic to that. I understand where you're coming from. At the same time, I think that for myself, right, like when odd things happen, and like odd things have happened to me, things have happened to me that I don't think I can quite explain easily, but that doesn't mean I think that they came from a supernatural source. I think I'm just missing information. I don't know where else I can go really with this conversation, just because like I think this is kind of like a fundamental, like a foundational difference that we have as far as like unanswered questions, what we want to put in that box and as a placeholder until we find out more information. Where are you at, Paul?
I'm in the same place. I guess I would just encourage maybe like the word supernatural and the word spiritual tend to be kind of meaningless. And I think if you just want to embrace the word, call it unknown. Unknown is a much more descriptive way to say things. And it kind of embraces more of a knowledge search than to try and solve the problem with just a label that doesn't really mean anything or give any predictive power or anything like that. So, and that's not necessarily to you, Eric. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong. It's just how I would encourage people to be if I got to be in charge, and I'm clearly not.
No, so my final question is, when I'm in a conversation with the church leaders, and I make a comparison with the statement from, hey, we are builders, and if we build an automobile, a car, and the car is not functioning, so do we expect that the car is driving itself to a garage and fix itself, or are we expecting to that the builder is do a checkup at the car and looks what the default is lying, and that comparison they didn't like. So yeah, we are human beings and we are not things. That's the argument that they used. So what do you think about the arguments or the comparison?
I didn't understand the analogy, so I will give it to Erika.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, right, like the idea, I think what they're going for is that it's like, okay, like let's say if you get a product and the product has an issue with it, use a car in your example, who do you blame, the car or the manufacturer? And the answer is you blame the manufacturer, and you hope that there's a warranty on the thing or you return it. In the same way, right? Yeah. Like we humans we are littered with issues, and there's just indeed a ton of suffering in the world. So the question is, whose problem is that? Is that our problem or is that the creator's problem? And I think if you're talking to church folks who are obviously implicitly assuming that there is a creator, I think that it broaches a really important question, because to me, I think in the case of living creatures, it's that, well, I don't suppose that there perhaps was a creator who instilled us with our problems. And that way we are responsible for our own problems, but we're products of our environment. But from a theological perspective, you can ask the question, right? Like in the beginning, when God's talking about making people, he explicitly makes people in his own image. And I would assume that includes characteristics like curiosity. So then why would you create a curious being and then put a tree in there that is full of knowledge and then tell them not to touch it, right? Like that seems an odd choice. And so that's when I'm talking about like the problem evil and like, the triumphant God and things like that. That's a question that I usually have. Like, what's going on here? Is it a long con? And that's usually the only answer that they can ever give is like, well, ultimately there's a reason for it. We just can't conceive of it. And to me, that's not sufficient, right? Like, I don't find that to be a sufficient answer. And, if you want to bring it theological again, like, I don't think God would find that to be a sufficient answer either. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Eric, I would put on my Jesus hat and say, you voided the warranty. It's not the manufacturer's fault. You voided the warranty. That's what I would have said as a Christian.
What I would say in response to that is the only way to drive that thing off the lot was, through a barbed wire field. It's like there was no choice, right? Like
that's why you're supposed to just voluntarily stay in the lot, Erika.
You buy the lot and you stay in the lot. Mm-hmm. You buy the car knowing you're never driving it off the lot. Like that's the option, right? Yeah, and then it's like, okay, well, why didn't the person who owns the lot just make a route that didn't go through the barbed wire field? That's my question. It's like, if he's this all-knowing all-knowing car dealer, brother, just make a different exit to the line.
Yeah.
Like, just make a different exit. So, that's where I would take it. And then it comes on to like, oh, well, he can't logically contradict himself. And then it's like, well, then is he really all powerful? It's like, it goes into philosophy, which I hate. So
that was the first caller that you had on the show was well interesting, because he said, yeah, you have a manual for living your life and do better and overcome sin. So if that is not happening, you don't overcome sin, and you are not victorious in your life. Who's to blame? So that's my problem with the belief and with the faith. You do your best, but your best is not enough, and God promised you victory over your sin, and it's not happening. And so, who is to blame? Who is to blame to your fault and to your lack of victory?
That's why I say we boycott God, Eric. Let's just boycott him.
Yeah, and but it was in the conversation with the pastor. It didn't fly for him, so he
that doesn't
broke
surprise
off
me.
The conversation.
Yeah, I'm not shocked.
Every time I've had the problem of evil conversation with religious folks who mean a lot to me in my life, right? Like it never goes in a good way, because it strikes a very particular chord in some folks, I think, that makes them very, very like viscerally uncomfortable. And then people get mad, and then the conversation is over. So
yeah. Hey, thanks for
thanks, Eric,
having this conversation, and have a good time.
I'm glad we were able to make it happen. Yeah, thank you so much, and take care, and best of luck.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. Oh shoot! I thought he was done. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. I feel like I could have told you that conversation with your pastor about that particular subject was never going to go over well.
I'm one of those odd ducks. I'm one of those odd ducks that I don't find the problem of evil slightly a good argument against God. I just don't. Like I guess I'm just too compliant. I'm kind of like, well, if God is, if the God described in the Bible or other religions are real, yeah, he's got the authority to do what he wants. So whatever. Like I just don't find it compelling.
Well, for me, it's not so much the problem of evil in isolation. It's the problem of evil combined with the triomni God, right? Like, it's like, well, he can't say he's all loving if then he's turning around and doing, crazy stuff like what a lot of people point to in the Old Testament, or like he wants everybody to be saved, but then not everybody has that route. You know what I mean? Like, it seems like the route is a lot harder for some over others. And
I guess I'm just willing to adopt that whole sufficient, like, maybe there's sufficient reasons that I don't understand is like somehow works on me. I get that your mileage may vary. I've had this argument with Bart Ehrman several times. He's fully convinced, and he's way smarter than I am. But I'm just like, I don't get it. I don't know.
See, yeah, I don't know. I guess for me, it was really emphasized when I was growing up that it's like, like God is this all-loving character, and then it's like that does not jive with so much of what you see in the Bible and so much of what you see in the world. And so to me,
at face value, for sure. At face value, how can this possibly be? For sure, you have to put your faith. You have to put your faith at some meta level to be able to say, okay, God lets people starve and it helps other people find their car keys. That makes sense. For what reason?
Yeah, like there's some kind of ultimate reason. I guess, I mean, and that's where it ultimately goes, right? It's like, is you'll see or trust me a good enough, it does that sate you, And for me, it's like, I kind of back up and say, well, no, because God explicitly made me the way I am, right? He knows the number of hairs on your head right before you're born. And it's like, he made me a curious person. I find it a little bit upsetting that it's like, if I'm created as a curious person and I don't have an answer for this, and God knows that that's going to turn me away, what exactly is the long con there, right? Was I never meant to make it in the first place? Like, and these are the kinds of things that like rock tumbled in my brain. And because I run a channel that's mostly dunking on creationism, that's what I like to emphasize to people, is that it's like, it was never anything scientific for me. It was always a much deeper issue than that. And indeed, for most people, that tends to be the case. It's people live perfectly happily side by side with the theistic evolution. I love those folks, but there's a deeper thing at play, at least for me personally. So
agree. Yep.
Speaking of evolution, we've got some evolution calls, and I'm gonna take them, Paul. I'm gonna take them. I've been patient. I haven't had an evolution call on one of these shows.
I got a drink. I'll just sit and listen.
Let's do this thing. Okay, we're going with Anders first. Anders, him from Sweden. He's an atheist. He wants to talk about taxonomy, which is, by all means, Anders, can you hear us? You are on the Sunday show.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What kind of taxonomy questions or concepts do you want to discuss briefly?
There seems to be two different methods to place being taxonomically, and I wonder what to do when they conflict.
Sure. What are which two methods are you referring to? Genetics and morphology?
Well, first it's by descent. You don't outgrow your ancestry. So if my parents are a primate, then I'm a primate. That's one way.
Yeah, the law of monophyly.
And then there's morphology, which says a primate has certain suites of characteristics, and among them are primate, dentition, and So I never developed any wisdom teeth. I never had any tooth buds for wisdom teeth, apparently. So I don't have the primate dentition pattern. Am I still a primate?
So, yes, you are, because genetically, right, you have the markers to develop those wisdom teeth. It's just for whatever reason in your developmental cascade, they didn't end up developing. It was probably a quirk of your genome in particular. But taxonomy, too, doesn't typically apply on the individual level. It applies at the population level. So you can determine the status of something by looking at the general population characteristics. And at a population level, right, like all humans, generally have variation, but for the most part, we're born with our wisdom teeth. Now, the wisdom teeth isn't a character that we typically ascribe to primates. It's a catarrhine characteristic, right? Having that 2-1-2-3 over 2-1-2-3 dental formula. So, regardless, you would still be a primate, right? Like we have all like a human. You'd be very hard pressed to find an individual who didn't have the primate characteristics. But it can happen, right? Like a person can be born with an abnormality where they end up only having 4 fingers on both their hands. Well, primates generally are described as having 5 fingers tipped in nails instead of claws. It's like, would they still be a primate? Yeah, they would, because generally the species has them, and developmentally they have them. They have that character too. It's just some kind of little genetic quirk that leads to it not being properly expressed. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And I am satisfied with this answer. And good luck to you both this evening. And actually, I'm a patron of Erika's, so I know you do good work.
Thank you, Anders. Yes, I thought I recognized the name when I clicked on you. I was like, I could swear I know an Anders, but that's phenomenal. So thank you for calling in, and thank you for being a patron.
Okay.
Take care, and I'm glad the question was answered sufficiently.
Take care.
So what happens to a trait, Erika, that leaves a population? So, for example, I can't even think of an example, but so we don't have tails, right? Like, so we, I don't know if that's a great example, but at what point that doesn't rule? It's the conflict between, I get the morphology and monophyly. How do you say it?
Yeah, monophyly. Yeah, you don't outgrow your ancestry.
Yeah. So that's just gonna hold. Like in 5,000 years, maybe we decide that we don't need pinky toes, or we don't need feet at all. We're in a Wall-E situation, and we don't.
Yeah.
we don't need feet at all, so we just, they atrophy away. So the rule of monophyly doesn't actually affect morphology at all. It's more just saying who your ancestor was.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, so I get what you're saying. So, typically the characters that we use to identify members of a given taxonomic rank are intentionally devised so that they account for these types of abnormalities, right? So the characteristics of a primate, right? All of the primates that we know of have all of the primate characteristics without exception, right? All of the catarrhines that we know of have the catarrhine characteristics pretty much without exception, right? At a population level. Now, if you were to develop a characteristic, lose one of these characteristics as you descend, right? You're going to have to change some of these taxonomic ranks because, and I maintain this, and I've maintained this for the entirety of my channel, right? Linnaean taxonomy is incredibly helpful, but it's not real in a biological sense, right? A species isn't a real thing in a biological sense. It's something that we use to help communicate what it is we're talking about, the group of organisms that we're talking about. Case in point, we've tried to find a species concept that works to define what a species is since Darwin, and in Origin of Species, Darwin talks about how we can't find one, and here we are over 150 years later, we still can't find one. Even genetics couldn't properly denote where one species ends and the next begins. And critically, that is exactly what was predicted and what continues to be predicted by evolutionary theory, right? Biology should be this big smudge. Critters shouldn't have these clear delineations. That's what creationism says, right? That creatures are created statically after their kind. Instead, what we see is a dynamic process. And as is always the case, when you try to apply a static concept to a dynamic process, you're going to fail. Things are going to slip through the cracks. So if it happened that we evolved, in 100,000 years or 1,000,000 years, and every human alive didn't have their wisdom teeth anymore, then one of two things would happen. Either catarrhines would be described as these old world monkeys, of which we are old world monkeys. Either we would be described as having a dental formula of 2133 or 2132, that's what defines a catarrhine because of humans, or you would just remove that as a characteristic. Fortunately, I don't know of a single taxonomic rank that has maybe there's one or two, but I can't think of one off the top of my head that's defined by only one character. So old world monkeys would still be described by numerous different characters, of which we would fall into. It's just you couldn't use that one character to define them anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and as a relatively recent young Earth creationist, right? It's a bit of I remember the struggle of wait, we're still fish, and because you think colloquially, and these phrases are used imprecisely, but that whole notion of wait, I don't have gills, so how am I still a fish, right?
Yeah,
and I know that fish is meaningless. Ultimately,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, ultimately, it's meaningless, right? And there's not a character there's not a this is what fish are, right? It's more here are the characters that define a sarcopterygian as more specifically rather than a chordate or a vertebrate. And it's we meet those criteria. It's not fish isn't a real taxonomic category is really the problem.
No, exactly. Right? On social media, these words are used imprecisely, and it actually creates some of this confusion that when you're on one side or the other actually helps to reinforce that the other side doesn't know what they're talking about sometimes.
Yeah, totally. Colors. I mean, and you see it people try to have these great, evolutionary resources. I see the one every time. It's like a beacon to every creationist under the sun. But the little animation that shows the Indo-Hyas evolve into a whale over time, right? Mm-hmm. And it shows this one little cartoon creature, dip its toes in the water and slowly start swimming more and more and more. And before you know it, you've got a blue whale at the end. And it's that's not a good way of presenting it because that's not what we propose happened. Now, if you know the background, then you can sort of insert in your mind, okay, they're talking about groups begetting groups here. And obviously this is happening across tens of millions of years. And no one is saying that specifically the species Rhodocetus gave rise to Dorudon. But because it's being shown in this sequence like this, creationists can sit back and be well, Are you really suggesting that a single little creature the size of a house cat became a blue whale by swimming more often? And it's like, okay, I give up. Like we just need better resources. You got to teach this at a basic level first, which is, that's what I try to do. But you can't whisper in everyone's ear
and succeed for many.
Yeah,
for many.
That's the hope, right? Like that's what, fingers crossed. But anyways, okay, we have a theist caller and we have an atheist caller. So we just did an atheist caller. We're going to go back and do our theist caller. Bill, please wait on the line. You've got a lovely question about evolution. I want to hear more about it. But first, we have Nico, pronouns he, him, from Washington. He's a theist. And he says, how come some conservatives not liking that historians, scholars, and researchers found out the translations in the Bible or any other divinely inspired books are translated wrong? That's what it says. So we're going to get a little more information about this. Nico.
Hello.
Can you hear us? You're on the Sunday show.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can. Tell us a little bit more about your question.
So, one of your people on your, I talked with him before. I can't remember his name, but it was months ago. I talked about because I'm in a type of way where, well, actually, let me do the question part because you asked that, so my bad. So, what I mean by the question I'm asking is that there's a lot of research going around. I've been seeing that people that have gone to do the research on the translations and going back to these original translations of these divinely inspired books, or we're not reading it correctly. Like for example, say I just saw a few things. Like for example, the say in Genesis, for example, we are created by Adam and Eve. Like we know that's not true. There's no way that two people like Adam and Eve were created. We're part of who they are. 8 billion people. There's no way.
So Nico, let me just hold on a sec. So that's a bit of a change of topic, right? So whether or not something is true, because whether or not just hold on, but whether or not something is true doesn't affect translation. Like the original thing could be also false. Like you could be translating. I can say I own a pig, and then that gets translated to French. It might be translated correctly, and you say, well, I don't actually own a pig, so it was translated wrong. Is not really an argument, right? So, separate topics about whether it's true and whether it's translated well. Carry on.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. So.
Oh, sorry, and I hope I didn't make it worse.
Oh no, you're fine. This is real. It's good for me because makes me uncomfortable to actually question this type of stuff and hear from other people. So, but the one thing is that because I remember asking this, for me, I've been kind of struggling because I'm reading the Bible, but a lot of things that I've been for my own research I've been doing for that last talk I had in the Q&A, it really opened my mind a lot, and a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it's kind of go with this question where maybe we're looking at this the wrong way, and if this is the right way of looking at it, then that means this is not the right way to lead our lives, or this is not morally right. Like for example, slavery is correct in the Bible, and also women be silent in church. That's wrong, and it's in there for. Why is it in there for? Is it just for control? Is it for something that we don't want to? If we go deep into the rabbit hole, if we question it, it's like, oh, that's wrong, or saying, oh, that's something different. Then how come people are getting mad at it, or pissed off at it because we're finding out, or I think the right way of saying it is we're intelligently figuring out, oh, this is not right, morally right in a society. Then how come people are defending that claim, and what can we do in the future that we can stop, being narrow-minded, for some being narrow-minded and looking at the correct way morally for society. That aspect. Hope
Paul,
that
this
makes
one's
sense.
Go ahead, Erika. This is all me? All right, well.
This is all you.
All right, so, Nico, I feel like your whole question is morphed to, and let me, if I get this correct, we have a better understanding now of what causes harm and what helps flourishing. We have a better understanding of that now. And as we evaluate now things like slavery or misogyny or all these things, we are now better equipped to identify, oh, this is harmful. And in that identification, some of us notice that, oh, some of your sacred books don't align very well to the goals of reducing harm and increasing flourishing. So some of us then choose, well, you know what? In that case, we're going to reject the books and hold on to what's demonstrable about causing harm and increasing flourishing. And I think what you're asking is, why don't some people also make that journey and instead hold on and try and defend in some way the things that cause more harm and that decrease flourishing? Am I accurately rephrasing to you what you're asking?
Yeah, because I think you got a nail on the head, and because I've been seeing even on social media and other things, they're leaving out the slavery and everything else. They're leaving out this stuff. They're always talking about the good stuff in it. I'm thinking, well, we get there's probably some wisdom in there, but how come you're leaving out the bad stuff? Because, like you said, we're able to nowadays figure out we know that's wrong. So why are we why are you not looking at that?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, and let me just preface that by saying we don't actually need the holy books to tell us about the good things either, right? The good things we can get almost entirely from empathy, which, as Erika can attest, in social species, empathy is a survival trait. And so so we don't actually need the holy books to tell us that, oh, I don't like to be stolen from, so maybe I shouldn't steal from other people. That's just kind of a thing that empathy gets you. So we don't need the holy books even for the good things. Unfortunately, and I will speak only from my. Go ahead. Did you have a comment on that part?
Yeah. Actually, I was gonna say, yeah, you're right, because I've seen some videos about and also I learned through when I was in school about for animals that have these type of relationship bond, even though they're different species, we're able to help each other out in the wildlife. And for us, we can kind of relate to that, because I didn't get why I learned what's wrong was through history, through human history. I didn't get it from the Holy Bible or anything else. I got it through us from history and what I've seen through, etc., what is bad and what is good, and what can we find in the middle for everybody to be good for society and accomplish their hopes and dreams and goals and etc. So yeah, I'm just agreeing with you that there is proof in the pudding that there are ways in the animal kingdom and also within us to see we can see what's good and bad just by how, even though the baddest person can be that bad, he can, in a way, you'll see that slight empathy within them, because we see it throughout the animal kingdom and also through everywhere else. And I do agree that I've seen that. If it was on film or...
You've hit the nail on the head there, right? You find empathy elsewhere in the animal kingdom, and you find it extensively. And I think what you're touching on here is like a contradiction that you've probably noticed, right? Where it's people teach a lot of the good stuff in the Bible, good, pretty not rudimentary, but pretty universal truths, right? Like the golden rule. and they teach that, and they don't touch all of this
I've
other
heard
stuff.
of that. Yeah, the golden rule.
Yeah, but it's like, they teach this stuff that's palatable, and oftentimes ignore the slavery or the misogyny or the genocide that happens. And I think you've rightly noticed that kind of contradicts the whole thing, right? Especially a lot of what you get later in the New Testament. That's all, seemingly supposed to do away with that stuff in the Old Testament. And then it pops up a little bit in the New Testament as well. And I think that can be pretty alarming, right? Like if you're used to being spoon-fed one version, it can really suck to pull the rest of the banana peel down and see that it's covered in bruises.
The one thing I have to ask you both. Oh, my bad. You're talking. My fault.
No. I was just concurring.
So I have a question. So in the New Testament, I just want to make sure, and also maybe almost to the New Testament, was there actually that God did command a certain amount of people to slaughter a whole village? Because I've heard this so many times about it. I know Abraham's story, which I agree is wrong. But is it true in the Bible that God did command a certain amount of people to slaughter women and children because of something else that they, because someone did that and the rest of it? And
so
also another one did.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was going to say also I've heard this before from other great thinkers like Alex O'Connor and also a few others, that Jesus did say that something about slaves obey your earthly masters, or as you obey Christ, or something like that. I've heard that.
So you're partially
partially
correct, and you're partially incorrect on a bunch of those things. So a bunch of those things you mentioned.
Like I said, I don't know. I'm still reading.
That's great. I will tell you.
Paul's got this. He's got this.
I will tell you just and again, double check me, as all of us should be double checked, but because it's been a few years since I memorized a lot of this stuff. But so the slaves obey your master thing, I believe, was actually Paul the apostle, not Jesus. But that absolutely is in the New Testament. Slaves obey your masters. And in the other things you talked about, the genocides are not New Testament things; they are Old Testament things. They are in the Hebrew Bible portion, and so one of them, for the worst atrocity, the worst genocide, is the flood. If you believe it was a worldwide flood, right? Then God actually just went ahead and killed everyone but 8 people. So that's a lot of killing. But also in terms of the main other genocide that people talk about, even though there are others, is the Canaanites. So what happened was
I've heard a little bit about that. Yeah.
According to the Old Testament, when the Hebrews left, when the Israelites left Egypt, they needed a place to go. And the Canaanites were already standing in the land where God told them they were going to be. And so they were told to
the
go
Holy Land. Is that correct?
Correct. And God basically commanded them in a lot of this conquest era to go around to different cities and to kill people. And in fact, even to one extent where sometimes they were being punished for not killing enough people. Sometimes the king would hold back some of the better sheep and cattle or the prettier women. And he was like, no, you're supposed to. I'm actually angry at you. You didn't do all the killing. So it's tough to justify. There is a lot of nuance in those discussions, but you are not wrong. Those are the stories. There's, in Psalms, they talk about how they gleefully bash the babies heads against rocks. Like those are troublesome passages if you're a Christian or of the Abrahamic faith. So those do absolutely exist. Go look them up and read them for yourselves. But I am often shocked to the extent to which adherents of those religions will defend passages like that, or passages where, for example, in Leviticus 21 or so, where you can beat your slave, and as long as they don't die within the first several days,
and also show
that
them
was
how
a moral
to do
thing
it.
to do.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and show them how to do it, and that you can pass pass along ownership of these people to your children, to other generations, and which markets are you supposed to buy people from and not. These are troublesome things, I would say, if you want to hold to these beliefs. So yes, I can just, I guess, affirm that in broad strokes, those things that you said are in the book.
Well, they're
one other thing.
People don't want to hear
go
that,
ahead.
and yeah, it's unpalatable to hear. People don't like it, and we've come a long way since then as a species, and we recognize more universally, but not entirely universally, unfortunately, that most of this stuff is pretty heinous. And so it's easier, I think, for a lot of people to point to the stuff in the Old Testament and be like, well, God was different back then, but he's also consistent in his character, and like those two things don't those two things are really meshed very well in my mind. But you read this stuff, and to me, it sounds exactly like what people would do and say if they needed justification to do something, right? Like if you you're going to the Holy Land, you've just had a really shitty time in Egypt, and then you're like, here's our perfect spot, but there's people there. What are we gonna do? And then it's like, we're not supposed to kill. And then some guy steps up and he's like, well, actually, God said it's chill this time. In fact, he said that we're supposed to do it, so we're good. We're totally good. We can go in there and take whatever we need, and then you do it. I mean, this is classic human behavior. You see it at every level across every historical period. I think that explains the vast majority of it, in a lot more of
in history, I've learned in history, you're right, that in almost every culture, it's almost the same thing. It's similar, how similar they are, because all they wanted to do is conquer each other for power, money, or land, and put their religion on others. If you don't believe in this religion, you'll die, period.
Well, and I empathize with the progressive Christians who point to the New Testament, and they're like, well, like this, Jesus came to undo all of this stuff, and we shouldn't do all of that stuff anymore, and it's bad, and we should love one another, and like I think that's great. I love that for them, but I don't find that compelling personally as like a why you should believe statement. You know what I mean? That's just where I'm coming from, though.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like that statement you just said for me was Abraham's story that caught me off guard. Is where I had to reread it again. Is where God told Abraham to murder his son as a sacrifice, and then before he did that, angel came up, saved his son, and said, "Oh no, you don't need to do that. It was just a test." I'm like thinking, like, well, for one, if we were at the time, we can figure out that was a test to begin with. We don't have to obey that. Like, why? Like, it's kind of like a saying, like, who would? I've heard this in a film. If someone asked you to jump off a bridge, will you do it? No, you wouldn't. Why wouldn't you? So it's like kind of asking, like, if God told me, if God told me to say kill my dog as a sacrifice to test my faith, that seems unfair. Legitimately, it really does seem unfair. Why would I do that? You're testing me. Why? Why are you want to test that? That's a very hard, that's sad, and a very sad way of looking at it.
Nico, let me give you a quick paraphrase. Yeah. I'm just going to give you a quick paraphrase of a saying that helped me figure this out. Was morality is doing right no matter what you're told. Religion is doing what you're told no matter what is right. And that's kind of, that as soon as I started thinking about it that way, it's religion is about doing what you're told. And or
that's interesting.
So
I mean, I think you're on the right path, Nico.
Go ahead.
You're asking really important questions, I mean, it's important to ponder this and come to your own conclusion. So I think you're on the right track.
One more. So this is very exciting to me. I don't know if you guys know about this, but the famous painting over in Rome of Michelangelo's painting of God's hand touching Adam. You know that famous painting by any chance? So if you look at God's painting, it's actually, if you guys can pull up the picture and see, if you look at it, it actually looks like.
I'm on the edge of my seat. It looks like what?
Oh no, did we lose him?
Nico, are you still there? What does it look like? Nico, no! Oh my god.
I would bet he was going to say that it looks like a brain.
Oh, sometimes you do get that. Yeah.
Was he gonna, is that what he was gonna say, Nico? Okay. Well, I think we lost him. Okay, Nico,
I hope that was a helpful conversation for him.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you, Nico. Best of luck. Shoot. All right. Well, I guess we'll never know. We'll never know what it was. We'll never know what it's supposed to look like. Oh my god. All right. We have 2 more calls, both atheists, so we're going to hit them in order. First, we have Bill, him from Pennsylvania. He's an atheist. He's got a question about evolution. Paul, it's my day.
It's your day.
Bill, ask away if you can hear us.
Hi. So glad to talk to both of you. I'll just be real brief. Homo naledi and Homo floresiensis. I haven't read a whole lot about them. I've just watched a lot of videos, including yours and Lindsay Nicole. I'm sure you know who she is, right?
Of course.
No? Of course you do, yeah. Anyway, but I never hear like a cross-reference. They're kind of similar, right? They're more primitive, both are more primitive than what you would expect in the timeline. You would expect them to be more highly evolved. Both are tiny. Are they the same critter? they're both descended from Homo erectus, right?
Yeah, so that's an awesome question, Bill. So there's the reason why they're typically talked about together is exactly what you just said, right? They sort of break the mold as to what we expect from late genus Homo, despite the fact that they're living like in the Pleistocene at the tail end of the evolution of our genus, where basically everything's got a big brain and is tools and is living at these all across the world, right? In the likes of the East Asian archaics and Neanderthals and Denisovans and all good stuff. Floresiensis and naledi are weird. They both have these teeny tiny little brains. Floresiensis is a lot smaller than Homo naledi was and also lived a lot later than Homo naledi did, right? So the dates for Homo floresiensis are like within the past 100,000 years for extinction, whereas naledi goes extinct, or at least we lose it in the fossil record like 250,000 years ago. So no, I don't think they're the same critter. I also don't think that they both descended from Homo erectus. And Matt Tochiri, who's done a lot of work on Homo floresiensis, proposes actually that, like, so this is kind of weird, but Homo floresiensis has some aspects to it, including some of its carpals, that look more Australopith-like. It doesn't look like Homo erectus, and it would be very unlikely for Homo erectus to lose these characters after evolving out east and then regain them in the likes of Homo floresiensis. That doesn't seem very likely to me. What that would suggest, of course, is kind of insane, but it would suggest that either you've got a late surviving branch of Homo habilis that also leaves Africa, or an earlier branch of Homo habilis, or even an Australopith that leaves and eventually makes it to colonize the island of Flores and the rest of Indonesia. If you look at Homo luzonensis, which is similarly dwarfed. Homo naledi is a different story. Homo naledi probably does descend from Homo erectus, or maybe an earlier hominin. And for whatever reason, it seems to have just never really busted through that gray ceiling. Early members of Homo erectus have brain case sizes that are around what we see for Homo naledi, so that's not particularly unusual. But naledi maintains all of these like apish characteristics in its arms and in its brain case size, brain case organization, relative prognathism. It's got modern looking teeth and hands, but its pelvis is still really weird. I think what's happening in Homo floresiensis is not, or in Homo naledi, is not unlike what you see in floresiensis, in that you're looking at this isolated hominin that seems to just be making it work, right? Like it's not that it dwarfs its brain necessarily, probably a little bit in floresiensis with island dwarfism, but there's just no pressure to grow a larger brain case size. They're eking out a niche just as well as every other hominin that it's sharing the world with, and it's doing it just fine with being a pinhead, right? Like it shows us that there's not one way to be human, and indeed there's no trajectory that ultimately terminates in a big-brained member of genus Homo. You just don't need it, which is crazy to think about, but pretty cool. So no, to answer your question, They both have their own autapomorphies. So you can, if you pick up a skull of Naledi, and I've got them in the back, but I'm not going to lumber back there and get them. If you have Naledi and you have Homo floresiensis and you look at them side by side, you can tell the difference. There are telltale characteristics in the crania of both, in the teeth of both, in the hands of both, in the rib cage of both, in the vertebral column of both, and so on and so forth. They're different things, which makes it even cooler, because that means this exact type of small-brained member of genus Homo works well enough that it happened twice in 2 different parts of the world. And so while Neanderthalensis is innovating and Denisovans is innovating and the East Asian Archaics are innovating and Homo sapiens is innovating, these guys are just happy doing it the way they're doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And certainly in Floresiensis, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, case, it is probably island dwarfism and island isolation. But with Naledi, what is there some hypothesis about why they became so isolated?
I mean, they're living down there in South Africa. Odds are, from what we know about how these migrations tend to happen, because, this is my opinion. There are 2 hypotheses about where genus Homo starts, but I think you can provide pretty good support for the one that I hold for. That's why I hold it, right? But you see the emergence of genus Homo in East Africa, in Eastern Africa, and then that area that connects Eastern Africa to South Africa, it pulses much like the Sahara does, where it'll be green and then it'll be desert, and then it'll be green and then it'll be desert. And we call these green highways. And so when this area is lush, hominins in East Africa can make their way down to South Africa. Naturally, that's the direction they're going to go. They're not going to go north up through the Sahara unless it's also green. And then they populate South Africa and do well there. You see the emergence of Paranthropus first in East Africa, then it pops up in South Africa. Australopithecus shows up in East Africa, then it shows up in South Africa. Homo shows up in East Africa, then it shows up in South Africa. So I think what, this is my pet theory, right, is that you have something like Homo habilis in East Africa. It's minding its own business. It's doing its thing. A group breaks off and makes it to South Africa. That green highway dries up. Now it's isolated. And it just continues to thrive down there. And for whatever reason, if you're not continuing to refresh this population of Paranthropines and other members of genus Homo, it's going relatively uncontested. But even with Homo sapiens and Paranthropus there, it's got no competition for the niche that it's filling. Homo sapiens is doing something completely different than Homo naledi. It's exploiting completely separate resources. Paranthropus is a big cow ape. It's eating grass and it's robustus. It's Paranthropus robustus down there in South Africa at this time. But none of these guys are going to be directly competing with Homo naledi. So my thinking is that it probably got down there, evolved its own little niche, right? Filling its own little niche there. Niche, whatever. I say it different every time. And then as these other hominins come in and fill out these areas, fill out this ecosystem, they're not clashing. And clearly, Homo naledi is not an absolute idiot, right? Like, it's still pretty intelligent. It's still doing some intelligent things. I don't think that all those bodies got into that cave on their own. They're the only thing down there. It's a really weird deal. I don't think they're burying their dead either, but to me, they certainly seem competent enough to throw their dead into a pit to keep them from stinking up their living space. So I'm just trying to emphasize and impart on you that it's like the way that evolution works isn't with a terminal end in mind, right? It works with what it's got. And whatever Homo naledi was doing was good enough for the living that it was making there in South Africa around Denaledi.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
We're going to find out more about this, though. Lieberger's team is promising that they've got new cool stuff on the horizon, as they always are. So I'm sure they're going to come out next and say Naledi's doing some other cool, crazy stuff down there, and people are going to be mad about it, and then we're going to argue about it for a decade, and it'll be great.
Yeah, the cave may have been different when Naledi was alive, right? Than it is now. It kind of may have shifted around and became more difficult to access the caverns or whatever.
Let me tell you, Bill, at the AABAs a couple years ago, there was a poster that was presented there. And usually posters get presented, and then the next year they end up there as some kind of talk, and then they end up getting published. That's a classic sort of line of like steps in the evolution of your manuscript. There was a paper at the AABAs a couple years ago that was specifically on the geologic reworking of the Dinaledi cave system. That was specifically what it was on. Now, Berger's team says this cave has not been reworked. But my understanding is they don't have all that many geologists on that team, and it is a really weird, like, limestone-style cave. So I think that we are going to eventually find out that there's been some reworking on this cave. Now, what that looks like, I have no idea. I'm not a geologist, but I remember finding that poster compelling, and I think it offers a really great explanation for how you're getting only Homo naledi in this cave system and like a baboon tooth and nothing else. A predator cache doesn't do that, right? A flood doesn't do that either. A flood doesn't sort by individual. Was Homo naledi using fire and like trussing up their dead in cordage and like taking this hour-long journey that we can barely take with all of our modern technology to get back here so that they can dig a hole and put their dead in it and then bury it? I don't think so. I don't think that burden of proof has been met. After reading all of the reviews of folks who really know what they're talking about, I don't think that's been met. But were they chunking their dead into a hole because they smelled bad? Maybe. They could have even been doing it because it was like a mild, level of spirituality, if you want to call it that, right? Like, we know Neanderthals had some level of appreciation or reverence for the dead, given they were certainly dug holes and stuck them in it and buried them. Which is a different, typically anthropologically in an archaeological sense, you parse that out as something that's very different from just disposing of it. Ants can dispose of their dead. Putting them in a hole and putting dirt on top of it tends to imply some kind of greater level of thought. Does that mean they believed in God? I don't know. Like, does it mean they would just have reverence for their dead? I'm not sure, right? Like, I don't think you can say they had religion or anything like that, but it certainly implies a greater level of thought. I don't think that's what Naledi was doing. I think they were chucking their dead in a hole. And I think that the more we learn about the geology of that system, the more it's going to come out about that. But, that's just my layman perspective. I don't study burials.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bill. I love monologuing about my opinions on Homo naledi, and I rarely get the opportunity here online. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Okay, you guys take care.
Thanks, Bill.
Dang it, I do this every time. Okay, Paul, I've got one for you now. I'm gonna let I have to
I just got a free education. I'm very delighted.
Oh please. Don't flatter me, Paul. Don't you flatter me on air. Come on.
I flatter you when you're not even here.
Yeah, whatever. I'm giving you the next call. We have two theists now on the line, and we have an atheist caller as well. So I'm going to stick you with Lemon, our first of the theist callers. Pronouns he, him, from the United States. He wants to make his case for God. I think that's a lofty promise. I'm excited to hear it, and I'm going to let you hear the beginning while I get some more water and pee.
All right.
Lemon, you are on the Sunday show. How are you? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Lemon, yes, I can hear you.
Yep.
Wonderful. I'm going to leave with you, Paul, for a minute and get some more water.
Hey, Lemon.
Hello.
Hey.
How you doing? What
do you got for us today? There might be it's possible, so I'll try not to step on you, but I can hear you, and I would love to hear your case for God or whatever it is that you want to call today.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the title of the video, the live stream, talking about the question of seeking the existence, if a God exists or not. That's the topic of the day, right?
We let the callers kind of drive the topic, but that was a suggestion, and it's something I would love to discuss with you.
Okay. Yeah, so I thought maybe I could jump on,
Please do.
Say my thoughts and so on. So I guess I'll just say, first of all, I'm a Muslim.
Okay.
And I guess a question that I would like to ask you first of all, to start off, would you say that the existence of God is possible? Is it a possibility?
It depends on which God you are talking about. So if you want to say, is it possible that... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll tell you the description of God in the Islamic belief, and then that will put the foundation for that. Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So in the Islamic belief, God, which is derived from the Quran. The Quran is believed to be the word of God. So God, who is the one who authored the Quran, he's the one talking in it. He's the one that's saying all the stuff in it. And so he's describing himself, and he's saying certain attributes about himself. So, for example, chapter 112 of the Quran says, "Say God is one, and he's self-sufficient, independent. He's neither does not beget or neither begotten, and nothing can be comparable to him." So, if you can imagine something, nothing is like unto him. For example, essential. So that is like the basic core attributes or belief in God in Islam.
Okay, so you're essentially asking me if it's possible that there exists something that we can't compare anything to, and that is very powerful. Is that essentially?
In our experience.
Yeah. So
something that we see in our experience cannot be comparable.
Right. So given that you haven't given it any omni properties, or you haven't given it any desire to communicate or anything like that, then I would say I can't say that such a thing is impossible. I would grant that there is logically possible for such a thing to exist. Sure.
Okay, so I'll say that I should add also that, because I was presupposing that the definition of God, which is basically or like, I guess the basic definition of God, how I know it, is like an entity that is all powerful, eternal, and has a will to do something. And yes, in the Islamic belief, we believe that God communicated, I guess, with humans through the way of prophets. So yeah, you can add that as well to the question.
Okay. Well, now you're adding qualifiers that I'm not as certain can be possible, because I would have to suss out exactly what some of those things would mean. I'm assuming by all powerful, for example, you mean only things that are logically possible. That's if I'm being charitable, that you're not saying that.
Yes.
That you're that.
Correct.
Yeah. For example, and what else did you say? I don't think. If it wants to like that it did communicate, that it did communicate with us, for example, is a strict. Now all of a sudden, that I'm not as convinced. You know that.
No,
are you saying it's possible for such a God to communicate to us? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, is it possible? Yeah, is it possible?
It's possible for such. I would imagine that it is possible for such a being to communicate with us. I am not on board that it necessarily has, but okay.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Are we leading somewhere?
So yeah. So I wanted to know if, like, for example, the way I understand is, like, if you're an atheist, then can you leave a room for uncertainty? Like, for example, there's no evidence to say for God, but even if there's like evidence that you would take that would say the opposite, that wouldn't
absolutely
make you reach a 100% certainty.
I think that would be. I don't think anyone is 100% certain about anything other than the content of their own thoughts. Yeah. Outside of the content of your own thoughts, I think that you're all just at a level of certainty, and so I am. And that's part of the reason I hang out here on this channel, is that one day perhaps I will be given evidence to show me that I should be believing in a God. So absolutely, I'm ready.
Got it. Okay, so
let's hear it.
I would say that the evidence, or like the proof, I guess, can be set up from both sides of, I guess, both sides of the argument. What I mean by both sides is, like, attempting to prove God, say for example, from first principles, or for example, like you're trying to prove God using a cosmological argument or whatever to reach that conclusion. And I would say that you can also go about it from the other side, which is from example, in the Islamic belief, if you're a Muslim, or if you're like analyzing Islam, for example, so Islam has the revelation, which is the Quran, right? And so if you can prove that the Quran is saying the truth, or like the Quran is truthful about what it says, and if the Quran is truthful, and the Quran says that there is a God, then that follows that God exists. Which say that that is like a reasonable logical argument.
Yeah, just I need to know which of those two paths do you want to concentrate on? Do you want to concentrate on the cosmological part or the revelation?
The latter.
Do you want to concentrate on the revelation? Okay.
The latter.
All right. So, would you agree that there are works of literature or works of there are textbooks out there, for example, that are correct about some things and simultaneously incorrect about other things?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So you understand that if you demonstrate to me, for example, that the Quran is correct about a handful of things, or even if it's hundreds of things, that doesn't mean that it is necessarily correct about its miraculous claims.
Because there might be things that are incorrect in it.
Yeah. Because there are degrees of correctness.
What do you mean by degrees of correctness?
Well, first of all, there's degrees of correctness in terms of saying it's hot in here is maybe less correct than saying, oh, it's 28 degrees Celsius in here, or for example, or something like that, right? So that's a degree of correctness. But there's also, I can say that I have a black dog. Is kind of correct. I have a dog that some of her is black and some of her is brown and some of her is white. And even less correct might be say that I have a black pig. Well, I don't own any pig whatsoever. So, right, these are just like you can, even within a statement, there are some parts that can be true and some parts that can be false. That's all I mean.
Okay. But I guess if you're specific, right? You're being specific, and you say, my dog is all black. And if your dog is not all black, then that would be false. That would be a false
Okay,
statement.
so
That
yeah,
cannot
absolutely.
be
No, let's say
somewhat true.
Let me be more clear about what it's. So I actually have a beagle, which is fine. So let me say I have a beagle, and I am 12 feet tall. The fact that I do have a beagle doesn't affirm the other part of my statement that I'm 12 feet tall. The fact that I got part of one statement correct doesn't impact the other statement that I've made. Would you agree with that?
Can the other statement be falsified?
Potentially, but I'm just saying that
if you're not 12 feet tall, then
actually, I'm now fascinated about how we're going to falsify Islam. But let me just answer your question. But all I wanted to say was, if you want to prove that the Quran is correct, you've actually hit upon something. Every individual discrete claim would need to be falsifiable and demonstrated. So if we want to reduce it down to that Allah exists, for example, the fact anything else that the Quran gets correct in history doesn't affect the existence of Allah specifically. So is it a falsifiable claim that Allah exists?
What would you?
I'm just asking if Allah is a falsifiable
yes for that
claim.
or no?
I don't.
No,
I'm not the one defining Allah, so it's not for me to say.
Yeah, I guess I suppose by the whatever definition that the Quran puts for Allah, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have two states, you either know for a fact that Allah doesn't exist, or you're unsure, right? Well, I guess we say unsure, uncertain. You say you would be convinced of something that would tell you that it doesn't exist, or maybe if he does, you don't have a complete certainty, or
okay, but that's unrelated to the truth of the matter, right? That's just my confidence level. You're just describing confidence levels at this point, right? Like, and that doesn't actually affect the truth of a statement.
Yeah, the truth of a statement, I guess, if a statement can be falsified, then the falsification process that would lead to a conclusion that the statement cannot be on any shadow of a doubt be true, then that would be that would be something. The Quran says something like that, then the Quran would be false. But if the Quran makes truthful statements and makes statements that you cannot falsify, then you cannot say that the Quran made a false statement, because you cannot prove that and reach that conclusion.
What do you think falsifiable means?
I guess if you're making a specific claim about something, and your experiences that you've been having so far, like for example, that if you drop something, it's gonna drop. Your experience of it, that's true, and so therefore, using your experiences, you would come to the conclusions. Like for example, there are things that you cannot prove. You have to presuppose, like rationality and otherwise, right? So with certain things, you have to use your experiences of your reality. If you can make the assertion that this, based on my experiences, this is what's going to happen, this is the truth, then something comes up, and says otherwise.
So Lemon, we're using falsification slightly. I just want to make note for you that we're using falsification slightly differently. So when I'm saying something is falsifiable, I mean that there is hypothetically a condition under which we can definitively say something is false. You gave some examples of things that we presuppose, like the reliability of our senses, for example, or I forget what I think. Just real, like we do absolutely have some things that we call our axiomatic, but we deliberately say the axiomatic things aren't falsifiable, right? So, but I wanted to know if Allah is such a thing that there's a hypothetically some piece of information that we could get and then to say, oh no, that the hypothesis of Allah has been falsified. Are we using it the same way?
Okay, I guess if I understand it correctly, then the answer to that would be no. You cannot reach, because what are the tools that you have? I guess all the tools that we have for examining things are you can use rationality, logic, math, I guess, and then you can use the scientific method, and all and I guess if you would attempt to prove God using a scientific method, will be a foolish endeavor, because you're examining you're using a tool that examines the physical world to try to prove or falsify something that is not physical. And so based on that, there's no tools available to falsify that. And yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So we're in agreement that Allah, as at least has been described to me, or people have attempted to describe to me, is not a falsifiable claim, and therefore is not actually a hypothesis that I'm particularly interested in. And this might be a character fault. This might be a character fault in me, but unless a claim is falsifiable, then to me it actually isn't of no use, right? Because it doesn't make useful predictions, or I am not in a position just because of my existence. Anyway, it seems like you understand where I was going with that, so I will let you continue.
Yeah. I will say I wanted actually maybe I should I guess the thought that came to me right now is that there are many religions, I guess, and many of them have different descriptions of God. And so we would say, as Muslims, that you can't use the scientific method to discern whether this claim that this religion is making is true, unless, I guess, yeah, maybe not, but I guess you would be able to use logic and rationality to discern, or make the assertion of falsification or otherwise. Yeah, I suppose in that way it can be falsifiable if the claim about God is illogical.
So, is there a claim about Allah that is falsifiable?
No, I would say you're talking about Allah as in the God in Islam, right?
That
not God,
yes, and I hope and pardon me if I'm using it incorrectly. I'm hoping I'm using it in the way that you, and thank you for your grace with me for in case I get it wrong. But yes, I'm saying the God as you understand it, which
yeah,
Allah or God as you understand it, is it falsifiable? Is there a claim about it that's falsifiable that would let me know whether it's true or not? And it sounds like you're saying no.
Yeah, not. It's logically consistent. If this was, if you want to say your intuition, I guess. Yeah, so you can't falsify it, but I would say that if, I would say, I suppose that with a high degree, with a high degree of confidence, or I guess at least like as humans, if you want to say you're looking for the truth, and you're like, okay, well, there's many claims out there, you can dismiss all illogical claims and leave the logical ones, and then you can go from there.
So then that brings us, I guess, then to I think it sounds like you've given up on the revelation side of this equation, and you are now shifting. Well, so I was wondering if there was something you said you specifically wanted to focus on the revelation, the Quran part of it, and I wanted to let you know that as far as I can tell, every document in existence has some parts that are true and some parts that are false, and that the number that it gets 99 things true and one wrong doesn't, like, the stats don't specifically matter. Each one has to be evaluated on its own, and you seem to agree with that. And so then I focused in on, well, let's talk about the existence of Allah part and not worry about whether anything else in the Quran can be verified. And you said, okay, but that the Allah part was not falsifiable. So I guess to me that inferred that perhaps you were done talking about the revelation side. Did you have something else to add on the revelation side?
No, I was the way that I going about this, I guess, is you're saying that if something, you're saying that if a piece of literature has some percentage of truthfulness, some percentage of falsehood, then that was false, right? How is the inability to falsify something make it, I guess, put it in the category of falsehood?
So I think I hope I was clear about this before. It doesn't mean just because something is unfalsifiable doesn't mean that it is false. What it merely means is I then do not have access in my limited human existence and tools to evaluate it, and therefore it is not something that is worth my time, right? Like it's if something is, if I can't falsify it, it absolutely could be true. So, for example, there's the classic, is there a teapot orbiting? Is there a teapot orbiting the Earth? I have no way to say there absolutely is not a teapot orbiting the Earth. But so it's an unfalsifiable claim. So then it's like, well, okay, well, and then it's why am I asking the question? Now it is,
yeah.
So yeah, you could obviously prove it by pointing my telescope to a teapot. That's one thing, but it's not a falsifiable claim. So I feel like most God claims that I'm given are absolutely in that category of, well, maybe they're true, and there's lots of, you could demonstrate that they're true, but until you can demonstrate a way that they're false, it's kind of like this weird theory that is unrelated to my life. And that might be a character flaw in me. It absolutely might be, and I'm open to you explaining why that would be a character flaw. But that's just personally where I'm at.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say, like if somebody, I mean, the way you put it, right? If somebody comes in and says 99 things, and those 99 things are true, one of them, those things could be true, could be false, but you cannot determine it. Then, right. I mean, I would, like, I guess from like many, I guess I would say from many perspectives, it would be foolish almost to say that is, because that is the case, then all of it is meaningless to me at this point. And from a probability perspective as well, and as well as from like for example, if I I don't know, like if for example, if I'm you're both in a test, and you're cheating off of me and giving you answers, and you're like, okay, this seems right, this seems right, this seems right. Okay, that one I can't verify, but he's right in all these cases. He's probably right in this one. It would be foolish.
Well, it depends on
to pick the answer that is opposite.
No, I'm not. I hope I'm not saying that I assume the opposite. But obviously, it's the nature of the claim, right? So, my mother, whom I'm only in all my years, I've only aware of one lie that my mother told me. She told me there was no eggs in quiche, and there absolutely are eggs in quiche. That's the only lie I'm aware that she told me in my whole life. But if my mother comes to me and says, "I saw a space alien," am I justified because the vast majority of times she tells me the truth? Am I justified based on that testimony in believing in space aliens?
I suppose. I guess that is a little bit. I mean, I don't know. That feels like an analogy that is much more extreme.
It was deliberately extreme. It was deliberately extreme just to point out that perhaps there's a spectrum here, right? That perhaps the nature of the claim is an important part of the consideration. It was deliberately extreme for that purpose, so that just to illustrate the nature of the claim is absolutely there. So if 99 times my colleague, goes to the gym and they told me they went to the gym, that 100th time, you're right. I'm probably reasonably justified in saying that, hey, yeah, he probably went to the gym, even though he may have lied to me and he did something else. I was still reasonably justified, sure. But that's why I threw in the space alien thing, was to say the nature of the claim is part of it. And that's what I'm trying to say with the Quran, that you can show me 99 mundane details that are correct, gives me no basis to verify something more significant, like that perhaps it was that an angel revealed this to someone in a cave, right? Like that's a different level of claim.
Sure. Okay. So, I mean,
does that make sense?
And I would say, and you would agree then that, I guess, depends on the case that is being made. You could be swayed based on the spectrum that you would fall on. You'd at least be pushed along this spectrum and fall somewhere where you can be like, okay, this is definitely probably the case.
Right.
And then that would be like.
Now here's another weird thing about me is that when it comes to testimony, and to me the Quran is in the category of the Bible or anything that's testimony, is more likely to be mistaken or wrong than for a miracle to be true. Now, again, this might be a flaw with my character, but I know people who are mistaken about all kinds of things. I've heard many mistaken statements in my life. I've also heard many people lying to me in my life. But I have never I've never experienced anything that could externally be verified as a miracle. So when it comes to testimony, which what the Quran is, it now has to overcome the likelihood that someone was mistaken or that someone was lying. And unfortunately, those are very high likelihoods when it comes to just statements broadly in general. So for me, someone claiming something, and this goes back to our very first caller, I don't know if you heard them, who were saying, like, this can be something self-authenticating. No, I'm going to need the external corroboration because the testimony alone, which is the Quran is, it's testimony alone, to me is always going to be more likely mistaken or lying than correct. Do you feel like I am using a bad epistemology there?
I would say that, it's not, I guess, the way you describe it, maybe, it's not just, I guess the way or the things that you might come across is not like a claim about something and that thing being true to us, and then you can either use other methods of corroboration and discern if it's true or not. I suppose, the different types of things that you might be dealing with is like, like for example, the argument of like, if the Quran demonstrates, or not just the Quran, I guess, if the text or literature coming out of the Islamic faith demonstrates something that cannot be done by a man, then that follows that wherever this information came from is not from a human source. Would that be a coherent logical argument?
Potentially, because I like the way you phrase it. You didn't say therefore God. You said therefore it wouldn't be a human source. I would be curious as to know how you ruled out the nature that something couldn't be from a man. I've never had anyone coherently either tell me why something couldn't be from a man, couldn't be mistaken, couldn't be lying. So I'm open to this as a potential line. I would need it would need to be very seriously buttoned up though for me to put something in the category of impossibly human. Do you have something that I should consider that is impossibly human?
No, I would say one of the things he said is like, it couldn't be lying. I guess when you say it couldn't be lying, you can't, I suppose, I guess I'm trying to fit this within the example. For example, if somebody, I guess, one of the types or one of the things, I suppose, is like, if the Quran or in the prophetic tradition, for example, makes a claim, or makes not a claim, makes several claims, about events that will happen. For example, you would say that, okay, if someone makes a claim of something that would happen, they could have, there's a degree of probability in which case they could have guessed, or what they said is not true based on methods of verification. If the thing didn't happen, then it didn't happen. Or I guess those are the two ways to.
Well, there are other things about prophecy, right? So you have to be able to prove, first of all, that it was clearly and demonstrably written before the event that it's supposed to have described. That is a problem may be aware of with a lot of Christian Bible prophecy.
Yes,
is that it's not clearly and demonstrably written before the. So that's, you got to prove that. Then you actually need to show that it is clearly and demonstrably pointed to a single instance of something and not just merely be interpretive, right? Then you would need to show that thing also couldn't have been deliberately put into place because of the prophecy, right? So, for example, it's not prophetic for me. If I order a steak and then prophesy that I'm going to get a steak, well, I know there's people behind the scenes trying to make my prophecy happen. So there's a whole slew of prophecy things. But that said, do you have the thing that makes it? And I have other rules about prophecy that for me would take that newly relied on Christianity. But do you have a thing? Because we've been talking for a while, so I do want to kind of get to it so that we don't leave the other calls waiting too long. Do you have the thing that is in the category of Paul should consider this to be not possible by humans?
Yeah, I guess the criteria that you put forward is you're starting from a foundation or a base of humans cannot know the future. If somebody makes a claim about the future, it has to be one specific, not vague, very clear, not so self-fulfilling. It has to have been made before the event has taken place, and it has to be somewhat numerous so that you can't say they guessed it. And would you say that if you had that, you would be very confident that the information is not coming from a human source?
Then I would put it in the category of to be impressed and to investigate further, and hopefully hopefully that you would consider that a win.
But I guess what would be considered investigation? Because you have to first be sincere. You have to go in not biased. And then do a good amount of due diligence to reach to try to
you don't know me, so there's nothing I can do to tell you that I'm there's nothing I could. A liar would tell you they're sincere, and a sincere person would tell you they're sincere. So there's not really anything I can do on this call to tell you that. But what you can do, regardless of my sincerity, is you could lay out, and perhaps maybe I am being very insincere this entire time, but there might be 1,000 people listening who are very sincere. So, for regardless of our motivations and how we're coming at it, can you give us this thing before we move on to other calls? Can you give me this thing that I should consider to be in the category of impossible for a human to do? What's your candidate?
You're saying give me examples of the prophecies.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's numerous prophecies, so you can.
What's the best one? What's the best? Given that I gave you that very specific criteria, right? What's the one that was obviously written early? Pointed to one single thing that people couldn't even been trying to make happen. What's the thing? What's the one best one?
I guess one of the prophecies that the Prophet ﷺ said. He made a statement saying that he's talking about the deserts of Arabia. He said that the deserts of Arabia will become rivers and meadows and become greenery again. So that's one of the statements, the claims that he made in what we call the hadith, that is available for people to see. That's one of the statements he made.
Okay. So do you think that it was impossible for a human to have made that same prediction?
No, I would say it's only possible that it would have been a guess. But I would say that, I would say it fits the criteria of it being not easily predictable, because the claim itself, it doesn't just make a claim about the future, it also makes a claim about the past. So it's making double.
Do you think that? Do you think the green again? Do you think the green again is something that doesn't require interpretation, but that is like a very specific? Like, how many leaves would it have taken for it to be green again?
So he said, become rivers and meadows again.
Okay, so 2 rivers and 1 meadow, and do we like? It's. I guess I am not super impressed by the specificity of this one.
What rivers?
I'm not super familiar with the area, so I'm taking your word for it at this point that it sounds like you saying it's already fulfilled. I will have to admit my geographical ignorance here. Go ahead.
No, it's not. I would say maybe there's evidence showing that it is starting to come true, but there's also evidence that the claim being made about the past as well is like there's evidence for that as well. But yeah, like I said, you're saying, there's some degree of vagueness, some degree of guessing there, but how much, of that degree would you say, okay, how much of that degree would you say you're being, I guess, you're not open to the idea.
Oh, I think I've said this several times. I may well have a huge character flaw that I am too skeptical about these things. That may well be, and that's why I've invited you to let me know where my epistemology is too cynical. But all that said, so for me, this is this making vague ecological predictions. We know that regions change. There's parts of the province where I live right now very rarely used to have hurricanes, but in the last decade, all of a sudden there's a hurricane season, right? So should I have been impressed a decade ago that someone said, "Oh, it seems like maybe in 10 years we're going to have a hurricane season here"? That seems like more of a educated guess. And also, would anyone have called them out? Like, let's say, for example, that the Quran had that prediction that one day there would be, green rivers and a meadow in that region. If currently that obviously hasn't been true the entire time. So, the people would have deferred it off and said, well, it's something that's going to be predicted in the future. Anyway, I am not, Lemon, I think that because we have other calls, I should let you go. We chatted for quite a while. Erika's been very kind and just not even just letting me run with the show. I hope you understand, even if you disagree that I may be too skeptical, I hope you understand that the epistemology, that I laid it out clearly what my criteria might be, even if they're unfair. And that until such time as I see a prophecy that matches some of those levels, that I personally am not going to be impressed. That might be my loss, but it is just, if I accepted the way you accepted it, then I would have to accept a lot of Bible prophecy as well, right? Because there's a lot of Bible prophecy that's even more specific than that I reject, and you would have to accept as well, and in other religions. So thank you for calling, Lemon. I loved this conversation. I would love to have you call back in again sometime. And let's maybe if you do get me, I'm on twice more this week. In fact, we could talk about that first half, which is the cosmological part. That would be fun to talk to you about as well, because I appreciate the level of thought and courtesy and grace that you extended to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you as well. It was nice conversation. I would say maybe you will find your criteria in the prophecies, in some or many of the prophecies. So I would say it might be good to check them out.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lemon. We appreciate, and call back another time.
Bye.
All right. Paul, I hope you don't mind. I took that as an opportunity to just eat hot Cheetos and play around in chat. You seem to have had a perfect handle on it. You didn't need me.
I'm all good. I got to do the same when you were talking about. I had nothing. This call, you probably had a lot of stuff you could have added and made me look silly, but I got nothing to add when it comes to human evolution. So anyway, I'll let you pick the next call.
Well, no way. No, the epistemology stuff. That's all you. I mean, my whole thing. I'm not so good at that. My strategy is always like, if it has to do with something I know about, I'm just like, allow me to throw citations at you until the end of time. That's probably not the best strategy.
Fair enough.
We have two more callers. So we have Lou, who's been on the line for like a hot minute, like an hour, and then we have one more theist caller. I'm gonna go. I know I'm gonna violate our theism priority here. I'm gonna let Lou on first because I think we might be able to do this one quickly. So Lou, you are on the Sunday show. How you doing?
Howdy. Happy Father's Day to everyone.
Happy Father's Day indeed.
Thank you. I'm a father. Appreciate it. I have two points, two short points. Could you look at Genesis 1:31, please? Genesis 1, verse 31.
Yes, I can. I got it pulled up here. And God saw everything that he made, and behold, it was very good. And then there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not calling concerning the day of the week, but calling about that God liked what he saw, his creation. Okay.
Okay.
He does not affirm that. I'm sorry.
No, carry on. We're just nodding our heads.
He does not affirm that there was not that there was perfection in what he did. At least not on that verse. My point is that God. Go ahead.
I mean, it depends on the interpretation. When I was a Christian, I sure did say that when God uses the word good, he means perfect in the New Testament for sure. When it says, why do you call me good? There is no one good but my Father. It's good. Good is synonymous with perfect in Christianese, at least.
Okay, then that's a matter of. I believe you. I believe you.
I kind of get where Lou's coming from, though, Paul, because like I had this conversation actually with Eric Hovind, one of the people in his congregation when I was doing that talk thing that I told you about. And he said they asked at one point, they were like, well, good means no death. And I kind of thought that was strange because I don't know that I buy that. Like, even if we're talking perfection here, right? Like, God uses death all the time in the Bible for his own purposes. So are we really I'm kind of pushing back on that young earth creationist interpretation that the way that the garden was, there was no death of any kind and no suffering and things of that. Like, can we really infer that on the text, do you think?
Well, I guess all I meant was... I'll finish my thought, Lou, and then I'll let you go. All I was saying was that for and this is not true for Judaism or Islam, who also use this text, right? But in Christianese, good is synonymous with perfect. Now, the debate is not whether they're synonymous. The debate is, what does perfect mean?
Precisely.
So,
yeah, precisely.
Okay.
So the debate, Erika, so that's all I was getting at, was that they are synonymous. There's much debate about what perfect, how to define that. So Lou, then I will let you give us your thought.
Okay, let me grant you that one, because I'm not a theologian, if that is a word.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that God was pleased. He agreed with what he did. He liked it a lot. That's what the verse says.
I agree.
That takes me to my second point. So while we're living the suffering, the misery, is okay with God. He knew it because he knows everything. That takes me to my second point, which is, go ahead.
No, finish your point.
I want to hear the second point.
Yeah.
The second point would be that God lacks compassion and empathy towards humans. It was about him. He was pleased with what he did. And I reject his love because of it, because of his love necessitates suffering. That's what I was trying to say.
So I want to say, first of all, I think that you're absolutely fair and right in doing so, based on what we were given here. I think that everything that you said there is fair from your perspective, and I agree with. But if I wanted to defend with my old Jesus hat, which really I should probably just get a Jesus hat so I can put it on occasion. There are Christians who
said that last time.
I know. I just need someone. Maybe I need a patron to someone to get me a hat. Christians reconcile this by saying, well, what God made got ruined, right? They move on to Genesis 3, where that woman who you made for me messed everything up. So it is possible for a believer in this to reconcile this verse by saying there was before sin perfection, after sin not, and that God, knowing that the person would sin, doesn't actually affect the perfection of what it was like before. So it doesn't actually necessarily, and we talked about this last call, it doesn't falsify this verse to know that, like, you would still say this is the perfect apple, whatever criteria you would have for an apple, but 3 days later it might not be a perfect apple anymore. It doesn't. The fact that 3 days later it's had some rot to it doesn't affect the first day. Does that make any sense in terms of how a theist might rationalize something like this?
I'm not a theist.
No, I understand, but you were calling, and I think you were completely justified to say that because God had this foreknowledge, the fact that he created it all makes him a monster. That's a hot take from Paulogia, that if God knew that even one person was going to hell, then he shouldn't have created it all. That's a hot take from me, and it sounds like you might even be on my side with that, right?
He got the chance to change everything and make it because he knew. I mean,
right. I'm with
responsibility.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You could argue that it's a continued thing too, because like at any point, as an all-powerful entity, right? Like he could snap his fingers and instantly undo everything. I mean, he's got that well within his power, but it continues to not happen. I mean, I think that if you're put on my hat here, right? Like I think a better way of going about it would just be like, no, I mean, sometimes God's perfect plan just has like death and suffering in it, because we're made in God's image and we can be kind of shitty, so God can be kind of shitty too. Like that's how I would rationalize it if I was in their shoes. I feel like that's the only choice that they have. Of course, calling it kind of shitty is a little bit of an understatement, especially in light of what we just said, which is that we're talking about suffering that is completely immeasurable if you're buying into the whole thing, right? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting hermeneutics that you can do with Genesis in particular that really drastically changes the way the text is meant to be interpreted. But none of that touches what your main point was, Lou, which is that by taking that step in the first place, by putting the the humans in the garden and then putting the tree in there, especially knowing, I mean, I get what you were saying, Paul, but like if the plan is perfect and the plan includes the fall, would that not imply that there are levels of suffering that fit into perfection?
Well, we don't need to get
put babies to,
who knows? Like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're playing in that, putting our theological hats on, like what are the implications of all of that? They get grandiose.
Are you talking to me? I'm sorry.
And also,
oh no, I was
think
kind of
you're.
both of you.
I mean, and Lou, I thought maybe where you were going to go, and maybe this is part of it, is that like, why would a perfect God need us? And was this entirely an ego project, right? Like, I needed everyone to. The only way people are going to live forever in a positive way is if they worship me. And how is this not a purely an ego project? And if this God was perfect, what could creation at all even add to it, right? So it does seem like he's not perfect if he needed to create. Go ahead.
Exactly. That's one of my objections, you know, because this ego trip, you know, this entity just wants to absorb all the air and time and effort for worship. You know, and it's never, nothing is enough.
Right.
Anyways, thanks for the answer.
We're all agreeing.
Appreciate it. You have a good.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for the musings, Lou. Appreciate it, and take care.
Take care. Bye.
I do like when we're all on the same page. That's that's a rare joy. Paul, we got one more caller. This is our theist. This is Michael. Pronouns he, him. From Ohio. He's a theist. All we got here is he's got an argument for God, so I'm excited to hear it. Michael, you're on the Sunday show. Can you hear us?
Oh, no. Hi, yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your argument.
I'm nervous. What's that? Sorry.
No need to be nervous.
Hello?
We're kind of gentle.
Oh, thank you. I kind of called in on a whim. I didn't really have anything planned out. I'm a huge fan of Paul. I watch the show all the time. Erika, I watch on here sometimes. You're very smart. I just sort of called in. I really started believing in God like a couple of years ago. Kind of. I don't know where I'm at with this. So I just decided to call you guys live, and I clicked on the thing. Like, should I just go with the thing?
Yeah, tell us what you want to talk about.
I was thinking I started thinking about infinity a couple of years ago, and like what that means and shit, and like if everything happens over and over again, like if everything is actually infinite, which like, and doesn't everything happen over and over again, and then like doesn't that mean that everything that could possibly happen already happened, and then like if everything that could happen already happened, then doesn't that mean like in like a universe that we live in, you sort of see like these complex systems sort of like emerge from like less complexity, and then things get more and more complex over time. Like I watched some video with Sean Carroll and shit, and it was like talking about like how like entropy, how complexity like increases with entropy or some shit to the midway point and then falls back down. So like I just kept thinking like, is this shit just keep happening over again? And then if everything doesn't that mean if the cosmos is infinite, then doesn't that mean that everything that could possibly happen already happened? And if that is true, then doesn't that mean that like whatever the most complex thing that could ever exist already exists?
So,
and then like
Michael, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
No, if you're on your last question, go with that. Tell us what the last question is. Then I want to try and steer us in one direction or another.
No, my bad. I was getting.
Okay. All right. So you kind of went two branches there, and one Erika is going to be greatly equipped to do with, and that is the complexity of systems. And then there's also infinity, which I don't know if I'm an expert, but I have thoughts. So would you rather talk about infinity and events, or the complex systems first? Which would you like to tackle first?
Well, I guess the main thing that I'm asking is like, is this like, isn't really the question is like, what is the most complex system that could possibly exist? Doesn't that have to exist? And then that has to exist, and what is it? I guess. Like,
okay, well, let me start with the. Okay, let me start with the infinity part, because I think it's more foundational, and then Erika can talk about the complexity part.
I agree.
Right.
The infinity part. So, infinity weirdly is an abstraction, right? It's not a reality. Infinity is not a reality, and in particularly, and I'm not a philosopher, and I know there's probably philosophers in the chat who are going to definitely pick apart things where I'm slightly wrong, but I will give you the general sense. One thing that most people would agree to is that you can't actualize an infinity of events. So it's possible to have an infinity of events going forward. You can imagine that from a starting point, but an infinity of past events doesn't specifically make sense because it is an abstraction. So and also an infinity of events doesn't necessarily mean that events are repeating. So there's a couple of problems there, right? That you can't actualize. You might be able to actualize the idea of an infinite. You might be able to imagine like infinite space or infinite time or whatever. But if you're talking about an infinite number of numbers, so numbers is one thing that people can kind of sometimes grok when it comes to infinity. Just because I've been counting for infinity, if I've been counting for infinity, does that mean I've said every number? And the answer is no, right?
No.
Like so if you compare that to events, just because there's been an infinity of events, if you can, in the way that best that can even make sense, that doesn't mean that every event has happened. Does that as a concept answer some of your questions? Like, it doesn't mean that everything that could possibly happen has.
I should have thought this through more. I think, but like, so like, what about like true, like, so there's like a true infinity though too, right? Which is like basically not like you're talking about like a I can't remember what they call that one, but like you're talking about like the other infinity or whatever, but then there's like a true infinity, which is like the set of all sets, some shit like that. And then like,
I suppose so. But let me make it simple. I think I thought of an example that might make it simpler. So, for example, because my dog just curled up a foot away from me, my dog has not yet passed away. That is an event that can happen and probably will happen in the future, but that doesn't mean that in the past that there's some point in this infinity of events where my dog has already died. And I know, I'm sorry, this is like a weird, sad discussion, but anyway, like the fact, like just because even if you could describe our time as infinite, that doesn't mean that every event, and infinity doesn't mean that everything has happened. That's all I'm saying. When it comes to events, infinity is particularly weird when it comes to events.
I don't think it. I guess.
Go ahead.
Can I just say? I need to not watch the video because that's throwing me off. I'm watching you guys talk at different times, and then I'm like,
yeah, you should definitely turn that off. And the chat, none of it's good.
Yeah. It's making me crazy.
I love the chat. Love you guys.
Like watching one of those old Chinese movies where they have the So like, I guess like, so my main thought when I started thinking about this was like, my main intuition about the entire universe is like nothing should exist, and mentally I've never been able to get past that. Like that's been like ever since I was a kid, I've never been able to fucking understand that shit. So like that was like my main thing, and so during the lockdown, I started thinking about that shit like hardcore. Like why does anything exist at all? And then like I just realized like, well, that means that there's either like a true infinity, which is no beginning, infinite in the past, in the future, everything is infinite everywhere. Like not just like a finite, like not when you keep slicing the pie into smaller pieces infinity, but like an actual true infinity. So I came to either had to be a true infinity or else it was finite. And then to me, all the arguments about a finite cosmos do not make any sense at all. Like, I don't understand how it could have ever, something can't come from nothing. Something can come from nothing, but not at a singular point. That's, I guess, the conclusion that I came to when I started thinking about what it means to have a true infinity. And I honestly can't understand, nothing that I've came across to make me understand how, if there's no beginning and no end, then how is everything that can happen has to happen. I understand what you're saying. I should have explained this better. Like I said, I didn't call in.
I appreciate the clarification.
I didn't have to find out when I called in.
That's all right. Erika, do you want to talk about the cosmos and whether something came from nothing?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, I think the point that's more important to address is this fact that we're trying to comprehend concepts here as creatures, as organisms that experience time in a linear fashion. And I don't even know if it's possible to be an organism and not experience time in a linear fashion. I have absolutely no idea what life would look like if it, I mean, it's hard for me to conceive of something outside of how I experience it. But I think that's part of what the big limitation is for us when we consider what infinity is and how it functions. I mean, it could very well be, there's so much about the cosmos that we don't know. I mean, our best models seem to suggest that insofar as we can understand, our universe as it is now started thanks to the Big Bang. Right? Everything in a hot, dense state and expands rapidly outwards, and life is sort of an emergent property of that. We have no idea how common it is. If I had to guess, I would suspect that it's probably extremely common. It's just really hard to leave your planet. But with that in mind, like it could be the case that it's like a Penrose cosmology, right? Where like the universe expands and then crunches and then expands and then crunches. Or it could be like that. There was
the white holes and black holes.
Yeah, there's like a trippy Kurzgesagt video recently about the idea that each universe is effectively trapped within a black hole because of wonky physics or whatever. All of that stuff is pretty over my head, to be honest.
Right.
Or it could be that we're headed towards heat death. I'm not entirely sure myself. I mean, that's not what I typically study. I tend to see infinity as something that is very difficult for me to wrap my head around and comprehend, and it's something that I have to kind of make my peace with and do my best, but understand that there's going to be limitations in that, because it's just so, I mean, we can't even comprehend a million years, let alone something like infinity. It's quite literally outside of our ability from a biological standpoint to really appreciate, which is crazy to think about. Now, as far as like complexity in an organism that's going to eventually reach like a limited or an infinite level of complexity or reach the maximum level of complexity, I get where you're going for, right? Like what you're saying here, like with an infinite amount of possibilities, you're going to reach something that's so complex, it blows our current conceptions out of the water. And what is that? Not God, right? But I think that I think that's partially limited. Oh, here, you go ahead. I'm rambling. You go ahead. You wanted to say something. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I was rambling anyways. I had a point that I was going to meander towards, but
I was just going to say, well, sorry, I kind of had two things to say. The one thing about infinity is like, how I started kind of looking at that is like, well, this is a bad example, but like I drank one time and then right around when I started believing in God, I was drinking a lot, and I still kind of drink a lot, but like when I woke up one time and I started throwing this beer can at the ceiling, and then it would land on the ground, and then one time it landed like, it would always land on its side, but then one time, like, I probably did this like 100 times, and then one time it landed straight up, and I started thinking like, that's fucked up, because like if infinity is real, then like, wouldn't that mean that like, so if you throw a beer can at the ceiling and it lands face down 99 times, but then 1 out of 100 times it lands face up, then, but if you do that infinite times, then doesn't that mean that like all those, it lands upright in infinite times, and it also
that is correct. That is why we tend not to apply infinity to events, right? Because
it makes an event inevitable.
Can't we just look at that through like block time? But sorry, go ahead. Hello?
Better. I'll just, one way to think about this that has helped me is the difference between infinity and eternity. And infinity is supposed to be an abstract quantitization of things, whereas eternal just merely...
No, you're right.
Eternal merely means without beginning. And so a lot of the cosmological models, they talk about eternity, not infinity. And what they mean by that is time is our fourth dimension, right? Time is merely, so we have X, Y, Z, and time.
Yeah. Einstein.
And so it's acceptable to say, well, that our instantiation of time had a start, and so therefore you can coherently talk about it. But that doesn't mean that prior to the Big Bang that there was time. And it's weird to even say the word prior to the Big Bang when you don't have time. But we just don't know. We don't know if it was a zero dimension. We don't know if outside of our universe, do they have fewer dimensions than us? Do they have more dimensions than us? We're inequipped to say that. So that doesn't mean there ever was nothing. And the fact, and like all these arguments about, well, you can't have entropy. Well, no, entropy requires time. So we will never be able to, at least I don't think we will ever be able to measure something outside of our space-time. That's just probably, we're going to have to be unsatisfied and say, you know what, that's always going to be a don't know. But that doesn't mean, because we don't know, that there ever was nothing. So, and eternal doesn't require this. Wait. I know
Could you say that one?
Sure.
Could you say that one more time? What doesn't mean nothing? I'm sorry.
So the fact that this
is what I want to.
Yeah, no worries. So the fact that our space-time began at a certain point doesn't mean that there was nothing prior to that. There may well have been something prior to that.
Right.
And that prior thing can be eternal.
That's sort of my argument, that there has to be. Okay.
Yeah, and you're actually, if you agree with that, you're actually in agreement with most cosmologists that say, no, there has always been something. The problem is we just can't grok what time looks like outside of us. So the fact that there always was doesn't mean that there's an infinite regress problem with whatever preceded us in whatever way.
Well, yeah, like I want to dip my toe in on that, because that was kind of what I was trying to get at earlier with, like, you know, we're organisms that experience time in a linear fashion. That doesn't mean that reflects the original and final reality of things, assuming there is an original and final reality, right? Like we can conceptualize what our universe is like because of the Big Bang, right? And we can take it outwards from that, and we can expand it ad infinitum, right? But that doesn't mean that there was nothing prior. We just can't, I don't think we're at the point yet, and maybe we never will be, where we can put it into terms that are easy for us to conceptualize. It's very woo. A lot of it sounds very woo, because we're not there yet on a lot of it, I think.
Right. No, I get it. But that's what I was trying to talk about with the beer can example. Like,
so that's why it's helpful to divorce.
You don't need to. What's that? Sorry.
Yeah. Just divorce, if you can, eternity from infinite. Just those are, if you can split those two things into two separate concepts, that it helped me trying to figure this stuff out. Yeah.
Right. I messed up because I've heard you say that before, and I should have remembered that, but like I said, I just got to call it on the whim. But the main thing that I'm talking about with the beer can example is that, like, yeah, you're right about, I agree with you 100% about time, but what I'm talking about is like probability. Like, instead of seeing it as a time, I'm trying to look at it as like everything exists that can exist infinitely, but in some things are more probable than others. You know what I mean? So instead of looking at it through the lens of like how we see it as time, I'm saying like look at it through the lens of like everything that can exist exists, but some things are more probable than others. We sort of interpret that as time. You know what I mean? I don't mean to go too deep into this shit. I was just trying to like sort of like.
I see. It sounds like you're getting into potentiality versus actuality as well a little bit there. But
well, I think that's how we see. I think that if everything that can exist does exist, then we have to see that our sort of experience of time is like it doesn't need to necessarily be like a block time. It could be the other kind of time, but if everything is infinite, then it really doesn't matter. We could all sort of see it as block time. You know what I mean? I've heard you talk about block time before. That.
Go ahead, Erika. You're shaking your head.
No. I'm just saying that shit starts to get so far above my pay grade. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's also where it helps if you live in a state where certain things are legal versus other things. So.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
I've only been drinking beer today. I haven't. I haven't been. No.
Yeah, in Canada, most of that stuff's legal. That's all I'm saying.
I get it, though. I get it.
Yep.
I think by and large we're mostly on the same page, right? Like I think to some degrees I'm sure we have some differences, right? But like I'm happy to just sit here and say, yeah, like thinking about time, thinking about infinity, thinking about the nature of the universe, its origin, at least insofar as we can put it into terms that we can understand, like where it's going. All of that stuff is also subject to where we're at in cosmology, which is a constantly evolving field. And I mean, we know things now just because of the James Webb, right? Like we know things now that we didn't know 10 years ago. We've got the what it's like the quote unquote crisis in cosmology, but it's not that severe. But we're trying to figure out how to reconcile the Hubble constant and all that shit. Like it gets pretty crazy, and I can only think about it for so long before my head starts to hurt.
So Michael, just hold on to there probably was never nothing. Just say there probably was never nothing.
Right.
And if someone says there was nothing, that's the burden of proof. The burden of proof is on them to demonstrate that there was nothing. And that ends up solving, at least in terms of Facebook arguments, that's helpful.
Right.
Yeah. I found that there is great power in just being like, I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of power in being able to say you don't know, being able to say that science is working on it, and you're happy with that. But I mean, if you want to put it into the terms of like talking about like religion and things like that, those make a lot more specific claims. So
I totally
why they're right. I don't know.
Right, I totally don't know. I'm not saying that I know anything. I'm just saying like when I shift back and forth from something's more probable than others. And I never in my fucking life thought that I would be like a theist ever, or even close to that shit. I was pretty certain that there was no God. And then when I started thinking about this shit, I'm like, oh fuck, this I can't reason my way out of it. You know what I mean? Like I can't move past this, I guess. Erika, could I ask you one more question?
Yes, shoot.
Because I actually just realized, you're really good at the evolutionary stuff. So, what do you think? So before I'm sorry, what's that?
No. I just go ahead.
She's affirming that she's amazing. That's all. Carry on.
No.
Yeah, no, I've listened to you enough to know. Where do you stand on do you lean toward before the agricultural revolution? And I think that maybe we should go 25,000 years ago or something before even the population started to become exponentially. The population growth started to grow exponentially, but before that, at that last we're at that last ridge of the population growth, maybe 25,000 years ago or something. What do you think about do you lean towards I'm sure you're familiar with Steven Pinker, and then the other side would be Robert Sapolsky type shit. Do you think that
of course
people were better off towards could we put that into a Garden Eden scenario type shit, or I know that's probably the bad way to phrase it, but I'm just curious about how sort of the agricultural revolution would if that's what they were sort of experiencing with or that's maybe what they were talking about with the Garden of Eden type shit, because the cranial obstructive disorder increased from our diet change and shit, all that shit changed, and then you had pyramidal hierarchies and societies and shit with I was just curious what you would think about that.
So I definitely think
we started eating forbidden fruit, wheat, grains and shit.
Yep.
Sorry.
Let her answer, Michael.
Yeah. So from the perspective of like putting it into like a Garden of Eden scenario, like almost like a Jungian like shared mythology where like we suddenly achieve this new level of knowledge or something along those lines with the advent of agriculture. I point to the fact that like agriculture is pretty ubiquitous across all human cultures, but it does show up at different times. And some people also just stuck to pastoralism or they stuck to hunter gathering because it worked for the society in question. Now, there is no doubt that there is a drastic shift in what goes on socially and hierarchically when you switch from hunter-gatherer societies to pastoralism, or when you switch to pastoralism to agricultural societies. An agricultural society is necessarily sedentary, and it's a lot easier to force, like, for lack of a better term, when you're in a hunter-gatherer society, things tend to be pretty egalitarian. Now, when I say egalitarian, I don't mean non-violent. I mean that nobody can single-handedly lord power over everyone else because you're getting your resources every single day as a group, more or less. So the general thinking, to my understanding, is that you would have seen a lot less stringent relationships in gender relations and things of that nature. The second you start to include things like pastoralism, the concept of having livestock and property and a homestead that you then have to defend, not only is there a hierarchy in class because you can have more things to yourself and you can get together with other people who have things and you guys all want to defend your things from the people who don't have any things, but you also get an interesting relationship with gender roles, right? Like, because you can isolate a person from the rest of their family. In hunter-gatherers today, women oftentimes are in a group with family, with fathers and mothers and siblings and nieces and nephews and grandparents, and that does two things. One, that protects her a lot of the times from being effectively what's the word I'm looking for? From I don't want to say abuse because that's not really the way of putting it. It keeps a power differential from developing as easily because the group is not going to tolerate their relative getting treated like crap, right? But when you get isolated from your family, it's a lot easier because the sexual dimorphism that tends to exist between your average male and your average female is easy to wield. So the second you go from being a hunter-gatherer society to being something where individuals can be isolated from their families, you're going to see a serious shift in a lot of different types of relationships, and indeed not just between males and females, but also between large-scale groups, because this group may live closer to the river, and then they have access to the prime soil, and then this group has like the herds that pass through their area, and you want that, so you wage war with them. So what I'm trying to say is that it's very difficult to put all of human society into a monolith and say, this is the thing that changed everything, particularly because shit is happening like at different rates all over the place for a variety of different factors. But it does seem like the move of going from mobile and nomadic to being sedentary does have an impact on relationships within groups and relationships between groups if, and this is a big if, modern groups that display that kind of diversity from hunter-gatherers to current pastoralists to current agriculturalists to the industrialized societies have anything to say about it.
I gotta think briefing that last part. Yeah, no, that's right. So you side more with Sapolsky than like Steven Pinker. It's like things. There was a point when people were probably more happy together, or like the HDI, whatever they call that thing, the index, happiness index.
I think
that was probably better.
I don't know about that specifically. What I will say is you see egalitarianism as far more common in hunter-gatherer societies than in pastoralists or in agriculturalists because it's hard to concentrate power. The second you can concentrate power in the form of resources, inevitably you are going to get more stringent linear dominance hierarchies, and you're going to get isolation, especially when people are sitting still.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it so much.
Thanks,
Sorry
Michael.
I didn't have this planned out better.
It's quite all right.
Paul, thank you. Both of you guys, thank you so much. Paul, it's cool to talk to you, man. I listen to your show all the time. Love you guys.
Love it.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael. Take care. Yeah, man, that infinity stuff goes so far over my head. I was so glad he swapped it back again. I was like, oh, finally, I can actually talk about it. It's like, oh, man. Okay, let's see. What do we have up and coming? Folks, there are a lot of wonderful shows that are going to be showing up later today and also for the remainder of the week. Tonight we have the Sunday show After Dark, and we have Skeptalk on Monday with Shannon Q and Reason to Doubt. On Wednesday, we have the Hang Up with Matt Dillahunty and Paul, is that you? Is that you on Wednesday on the Hang Up?
Yep. I'll hang out with Matt.
With Matt on Thursday.
I'll have to play good cop.
Oh, go ahead.
All good. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you play good cop pretty well, actually. Matt takes the role of bad cop usually. That's why when him and Jimmy get on a show together, it's like I would be nervous to call him. On Thursday, we have the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Josie and Luxander. We have a debate on Saturday, and then next Sunday, the Sunday show original is going to be hosted by Matt Dillahunty and Arden Hart, and After Dark will be Paulogia and Eric SS. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. Jesus, Paul, you weren't kidding about being on like several times this next week.
It's a good week for everyone to take off. Exciting. No, everyone should listen. Yes, call in.
Call in. Give them your best. So that's all I got. You got anything else?
That's all I got.
Anything fun coming up? Anything you want to share?
No, I got some scholars. I got a lot of animating to do. Oh, actually, no. I will tease it that it's Satan's coming on my channel, so that's exciting.
Wow, how'd you book that?
I got Satan on my channel, so look out for that.
Oh man. All right, guys. Well, that's all I got for you. I'm so glad that you were here with us June 16th, June 2024. This has been The Sunday Show. I've been your gentle and modern host, Erika, or Gutsy Gibbon, with my wonderful co-host here, Paulogia, and we hope to see you guys real soon next time. And then eventually the music comes off.
Later.
And then that's the dancing.
And then, now we either pretend to talk or actually talk.
Yeah, I know. Normally I should dance it, but I can't dance it all the time. I've given up.
Just do animal noises or something.